Sword of Coming Chapter 12:17. Chapter 12:17. Snow light. It rains continuously in the mountains, and the vegetation knows spring best. In the wine shop at the foot of the mountain that was renamed Xiao Mountain, Song Wu, the goddess of the mountain who also had her name changed at the top of the mountain, used Zhangwangqi technique to overlook the capital of Yushuan Kingdom. She no longer cares about worrying about Ma's fate. She is just worried that her Xiao Mountain is adjacent to the capital, and she is afraid of being affected. She just doesn't know how big a storm the previous group of people will cause in the capital, and is afraid that this kind of mountain will collapse and the ground will break up. When gods fight, both sides won't stop once they get started. The three drinkers who had taken shelter from the rain before, Lu Xianyang, the current leader of Longquan Sword Sect, Gu Ken, the direct descendant of Mr. Zheng in Beidasheng City, and Pei Qian, one of the four great masters of Aquarius continent, none of them had ever been thought of before. Dare to think of the top figures in the continent regardless of identity and strength. Song Wei is a female mountain after all, so she admires the young but famous Grandmaster Pei the most. If not for the incident in Yuxiangua today, she would how happy would Song Wei be to be able to drink in his own shop? Song Wei sighed quietly, feeling envious of her fellow water gods nearby. At least they could stay away from the storm. She lifted the corners of her skirt, revealing a pair of embroidered shoes, and lamented that the golden statue in the mountain temple no longer had long legs. At this moment, an old man who looked like a farmer appeared out of thin air at the door. Song Wei was so frightened that he knelt down and saluted on the spot. After all, this was the boss of his immediate boss, and there was a huge difference in status between the two parties. The visitor was none other than Zhou Xian Mountain Monarch. Tong Wenchong, who should now be honored as the Divine Monarch, took the lead in crossing the threshold with his hands behind his back and said, "We will not talk about official business today. There is no need to be restrained. We are just looking for a place to drink. You are the master. I'm a guest." Song Wei was shocked and relieved and immediately relaxed his frown. With Tong Shinjun here, her little mountain god's temple must be worry-free. In the capital, Gu Ken used his magical power to shrink and left the palace in one step, and went straight to the vicinity of Qintian prison. He did not say hello to the nominal maid, but just walked around the streets alone like a tourist. In a bookstore that sells rare books, he casually browsed through the books and chose a fairy book named after a certain person. He placed it in a prominent position for the shopkeeper. This kind of book was not popular in the market. Gu Ken flipped through it casually. The opening page is about how the immortals in the mountains cook several kinds of medicinal food. According to this book, the immortal family's mountain and wilderness cleansing is very mysterious. The food is refreshing and the meat is not fat. Light and agile. Over time, diners can be as light as a leaf, walk as fast as flying, and walk across mountains and rivers as if they are walking on flat ground. Gu Ken smiled and shook his head. Qi practitioners go to the mountains to practice Taoism. How can it be so simple to achieve the state of being light and lifting one's body? However, there is an annotation in the book that is quite good. It is equivalent to revealing the secret of heaven in one sentence. Ancient people made elixirs and collected medicines from all over the mountains and rivers. A charming woman walked into the shop slowly, staggered deliberately, twisted her waist and fell into Gu Ken's arms. Gu Ken didn't raise her head, but stretched out her hand to touch the woman's forehead and then pushed her away. The bookseller on the side looked wide-eyed, never thinking that this customer who only wanted to see and buy was actually a gentleman. If it were him, he would also reach out to help her. In the panic, he could not guarantee where he would hold down the bow-tie's delicate body. The woman stood up straight, covered her mouth and said with a sweet smile, "Is this trip safe for the young master?" Gu Ken ignored it and just asked the shopkeeper, "Does the shop sell the seal book of the 100-sword Immortal?" The shopkeeper was confused and asked out of curiosity, "Who compiled it? Is it the original or a reprinted version?" Gu Ken smiled, put down the book in his hand, took Gu Lingyan out of the shop, and walked in a relatively quiet alley. He took a rough look at Gu Lingyan's harvest, put it all in his bag and gave him a neither high nor low rating. "All right." Gu Lingyan took out a square-inch object in the shape of a mountain ghost's money from his sleeve, and said with a smile, "There is also this." Gu Ken asked, "What?" Gu Lingyan said, "They are all old almanacs from different years and some are professional books related to almanacs. Counting is not my specialty. I got a headache just looking at them, so I packed them all in close proximity." Gukin separated a channel of consciousness and inspected the storage inside the money. After a few cursory glances, he only took out some thin booklets as if pinching the ends, and threw the square-inch object back to her. The rest of the almanacs, return them all to Qin Tianjian. Since ancient times, human dynasties have had rules for compiling and issuing almanacs. Some good people on the mountain like to collect almanacs from different dynasties and different years. However, what Gukin left behind was only the legal calendar determined and compiled by his predecessors, and some accompanying corrections of the sun, moon, and moon. He seemed not to be interested in the almanac. Seeing the unwilling expression on her face, Gukin gave her a brief explanation. According to the popular saying, if you collect a year's worth of almanacs, your family will be repaid. Gu Lingyan blinked. What do you mean? Gukin said, it's just that the house is prone to water leakage and fires. Gu Lingyan asked, real or false? Gukin said, some things, it is better to believe that they are true than to believe that they are not true. There is no need to test the truth by yourself. Gukin seemed to be in a good mood, and it was rare for Gukin to say a few words to Xian Tian. If there is a flood disaster caused by a star change, the courts of various countries will request a whole set of Jiazi almanacs to implement a method of victory. So Qin, the place Tianjian used to store the almanacs of various dynasties, was very particular. For example, a certain character in the name of the library would usually be the radical of the word water, such as yuan, sui, jin, etc. She nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Gukin suddenly asked, where did this mountain ghost money come from? Gu Lingxian smiled sweetly and said, there are Xianxia ferry crossings and marketplaces in the wild world, okay? I'm not allowed to step on dog and pick it up. The purpose of mountain ghosts is to distinguish them from orthodox mountain gods. Ask the mountain ghost who has been blessed by the Daoist temple to spend money. It is regarded as a pure yang thing which can be used to house or hang. Even in the mountains, this kind of spending is very popular because there is no worry about it being easy to invite gods but difficult to send away, and it is very effective to use it to open a furnace in town. Gukin said, it's worth some money, keep it well. Gu Lingyan asked, young master still hasn't decided on the location of the sect? Gukin nodded, it's not a trivial matter. It's not urgent anyway. Let's look at a few more places. Gu Lingyan smiled and said, in the final analysis, the young master is just hesitant and undecided. He didn't hesitate to antagonize Lingfei Palace, but he also wanted to step in and buy the Hehuan mountain boundary, which was said to be Little Shujian Lake, from the Qingxing Kingdom's court. It's impossible for Gukin to think that money is too hot to handle. In the final analysis, it was Gukin who hesitated and had an impulse to do something to prove something to someone before choosing the Hehuan mountain area for the sect. But his reason told him that this choice was an idiotic move. Gukin didn't want to talk to her about this, so her mind turned elsewhere and she laughed to herself. She asked curiously, did young master think of something interesting? Gukin smiled and said, it's okay here in Aquarius Island. The news is not available, so we don't know much. There are flowers inside the walls and fragrance outside the walls. In other places there are some interesting sayings. They all think that he comes from a scholarly family and has grown up since childhood. Just fill your stomach with poems and books. The reason is very interesting. Look at the hundreds of pages of music. How can it be common people's language? She covered her mouth and smiled. It was really funny. Gukin continued, even if you know his general background and know that he is a mud-legged man, you still say that it is called a noble son from a poor family and a high official from a white house. It must be that Qinjun has made great contributions to the world at a young age. Gukin wanted to laugh when he thought of these kind words. She said cautiously, if the Chinese Confucian temple hadn't deliberately concealed it, not to mention the honorific title of Qinjun, some people would have respectfully addressed it as Qinzi, right? Gukin laughed it off. Sir, have you ever thought about what kind of person you must become in this life? Just think about who you don't want to be. Give me an example. Such as the embroidered pillows that you find useless. My young master, it's useless. You haven't tried it. It rained from the sky and flowed from the ground to the ground. There were fights at the head of the bed and at the end of the bed. When they arrived at a place, seeing Gukin stop walking, Gu Lingxian asked in confusion, Sir, what is this? Gukin said, we are waiting for someone. We have arranged to meet here. Gu Lingyan became more and more curious. Is there an expert hiding in the palace? Gukin said, there are not so many things to pick up. National Master Huang Lai is in the Golden Core realm. I roped him in to be the sex worshipper. He is familiar with the customs of the mountain and the rules of the officialdom. He can help with some common affairs. Gu Lingyan asked, "Need it?" Gukin said, "Of course Baidi City doesn't need it, but my sect does. This is a scenic spot in the capital with a touch of fairy spirit. It is called Moon Mirror Pond and is home to various carps. People in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom have had the custom of releasing carps here since ancient times. A pavilion was built next to the pool, and an ancient mirror was hung on the forehead. The couplets were very mottled and old. The content was that there was no need to avoid the fish, shrimps, turtles and snakes. The light only illuminated the dragon. It is said that every moonlit night, the water here is particularly bright and clear with sparkling waves. It seems that it is indeed true as the couplet says, and it is not a lie. Just now, Gukin did not enter the pavilion, but stopped at the entrance of a nearby Taoist temple. Mixed in the bustling city, it was a cold and unpopular temple, the kind that ordinary people would miss when passing by. Gu Lingyan looked at the small Qingjing Taoist temple. The door couplet here was also strange. There were elves and gods, but he didn't know who the melting caste was. It was more like the words in half a couplet. Gu Lingxian instantly understood. Could it be that together with the pavilion couplets they were called a couplet? In this way, Gu Lingyan took a long look at the deserted Taoist temple called Chongyang. Unfortunately, she was not familiar with the art of looking at qi and could not see any more ways. She doesn't take it seriously and doesn't care about people living in seclusion here to practice Taoism. First of all, the spiritual energy in the mind is thin, and what does it mean to be a Taoist? She herself is Yu Pu with excellent qualifications. Is there an immortal in there who can ascend to refine elixirs here? She turned her head and looked around, and there came a golden elixir earthly immortal who was not too young. Is he the owner of this Taoist temple? Gukin smiled and asked, "Is the handover completed?" Huang Lai nodded and said, "Following your instructions, I told Xuepeng the truth. When I heard it was you, I had a shit-eating expression on my face and didn't dare to say anything." Suddenly realizing that this metaphor seemed a bit inappropriate, the old man hurriedly smiled and said, "I'm sorry for not using my words. Anyway, both parties are polite and it's easy to get together and part ways." Gukin said, "You can speak freely from now on. Xuepeng can tolerate a national master who picks up lice and takes off his boots, but I am always slightly more generous than him." Huang Lai smiled and said, "This is a good thing. When I came here, I was still struggling with whether I would be tricked by sect Master Gu into the house and then turn my back and deny anyone." Gukin shook his head and said, "You still don't know much about our Baidi city. The rumors from the outside world are spread by false rumors and cannot be accurate. In Baidi city, the native genealogy monks go out to do things and their ways are relatively wild. The Xianxia cultivators who entered the city halfway are more disciplined." Huang Lai said cautiously, "If I have the opportunity, I can go to Baidi City to see the lanterns. I only need to get a general view of it. I'm really curious and longing for it. I have been fascinated by it for a long time." Gukin said, "The threshold of Baidi City will only get higher and higher in the future. This matter is indeed not easy, but it can be discussed. For example, we can wait until you reach the nascent soul realm." Gu Lingyan seemed to have just discovered that there was such a famous person. He smiled brightly and said in a strange way, "Oh, it's amazing, he is actually an old of golden elixir." Huang Lai laughed and said, "Siu." Gukin glanced at her and reminded, "Speak like a human being." She obviously listened to the advice and she turned sideways and said a blessing, "I'm so effective I've met my senior. I've only been with the master for a short time, and I don't understand the rules and etiquette. I kindly ask my senior to atone for my sins." Gukin introduced. She is now under the pseudonym Yingshen. She is from the Wild Demon clan and is in the Jade Pu realm. She has good qualifications. Huang Lai was not surprised at all. City Master Zheng, his master's apprentice, was not allowed to show off when he went out. It's just a personal maid who is at the Jade Purity realm, so there is no need to make a fuss. Thinking this way, Lao Jindan couldn't help but feel melancholy in his heart. This seemingly weak young woman in front of him was, after all, an unattainable Jade Pure realm. The key was that she came from the wild world. Huang Lai couldn't help but asked curiously, "What kind of person is Master Qin?" Just like Baidi City, the real scene inside is very different from the rumors outside. Gukin smiled and said, "There is no need to use him repeatedly to beat me." Huang Lai's scalp tightened. "I don't dare. Sect Master Gu has misunderstood." Gukin said, "Then try not to let me misunderstand." It wasn't until this moment that Huang Lai truly understood the unique style of behavior of the genealogy monks in Baidi City. Gu Lingyan smiled brightly. Gukin asked, "Where is this place?" Huang Lai said with a smile, "This place was once a family temple built by dignitaries who donated money. It was called Alchemy Temple in ancient times, but now it is called Chongyang." Gukin nodded and said, "I saw that the weather here was good before. Of course, compared to the capital of your Yushuan kingdom, it is called Alchemy Temple. No wonder I think this is a good place for alchemy. I changed the name well. I guess it is an expert. The first to get the moon is near the water tower. The predecessors deliberately chose this place. There is no doubt that the water elixir is refined here. If it is named Chongyang, it will gain a little bit. The giant prong is molten, the golden furnace is golden, the purple light is gradually emitting, and the red energy is deep. I guess a so-called land will appear in the future. As for how long it will take in the future, whether it will be decades or hundreds of years, I am a layman in the art of gazing, so I don't know. The art of looking at the qi is different from the ordinary magic and magical powers of the immortal family. It is also different from the so-called clairvoyance, feat and magical functions. This method is similar to a talisman and the threshold is quite high. It pays attention to the talent and foundation of the Daoist. The success or failure seems not to be determined by human power but by destiny. Only the gods of mountains and rivers who are not canonized by the imperial court can immediately master this method by shaping their golden bodies and erecting temples. In addition to the imperial guards of various countries, there are also those strange people and fortune-tellers who travel all over the world. Huang Lai said, "Go in and ask for a cup of tea?" Gukin shook his head and said, "Go somewhere else for a stroll. It doesn't matter where you go. The vast world of mortals infects the human body, and the melting furnace of heaven and earth forges the alchemy elixir. People in the world say that gods are good, and a golden elixir can guarantee immortality. If you don't know how difficult it is to practice Taoism, your heart may turn into ashes." Stopping along the way, I looked at the willow color with sadness, which grew deeper and deeper with the spring. In the world of Qin Pingan's heart. On the top of the city, standing behind Ma Kushuan, Zhou looked like a goddess in the temple of obscenity among the mountains and rivers, with a shining golden body and a calm smile, as if he had just said goodbye. Although he knew it must be false, Qin Pingan was still in a weird mood, frowned and asked, "How did you do it?" Old god Ma Kushuan said, "Calling the soul." Ma Kushuan's eyes were hot, as if there was a huge riddle for Qin Pingan to solve. "Don't you always have a good memory?" In the past, such things did not often happen near Xinghua Lane and Clay Vase Lane. "Have you forgotten? When the children were frightened and lost their souls, their parents would lead them through the streets and in the wilds, calling their names all the way to help the wandering souls return home. There are so many ancestral crafts in the world that have been lost. I'm just reinventing them. I just picked it up. What is the effect? Are you shocked? It can make Qin Yingguan Qin Jianxian, who is accustomed to the big world, feel so fearful. It is not in vain that I have put so much effort into it." Qin Pingan asked, "Have you thought about the consequences? The resonance between heaven and man that monks in the world cherish is all about the resonance between man and heaven and earth. Aren't you, Ma Kushuan, afraid that Zaitian Zhoumi, who occupies the former side of heaven, will be connected with the human world? Separate and descend to the earth? Give birth to a contingency? Especially at this critical moment when the founders of these three religions have dispersed." Ma Kushuan felt like he had heard the funniest joke. "You have already come to kill me and you still advise me not to break the jar? Why should I keep this kind of trump card? I can use it when I go to the grave to worship my ancestors next year?" Qin Pingan was silent. Ma Kushuan stared at the guy who had held a grudge for so many years and said in a deep voice, "Now I give you two choices. Either you quit the Ma family immediately and wipe out the old grudges, and I will also persuade them to stop enjoying incense sacrifices. The idea of achieving immortality in Shinto will cause your body to age day by day, and you will die at the end of your life. Or in order to avenge your own personal revenge, you will not hesitate to risk dragging the entire world into the whirlpool and become my enemy. Of course, just with this risk, but I didn't say that the person who came from behind must be so capable that he could cause harm to the world. You can bet." Qin Pingan said, "You have misunderstood. What I call consequences has little to do with this world. I am better at starting from scratch and cleaning up messes like a swallow holding mud. I'm talking about you. You want to do this next year. On Qingming Festival, Ma Yanshan and Ma Yue, how many glasses of wine would you like to toast to your brother, whom they regard as the pillar of the family? Goddess Ma of Xinghua Lane, you have been kind to me in delivering my baby. Your grandma cannot miss the old days, but I want to miss this one. Love, in the final analysis, although it is a business, one of the many businesses she has done, I once heard someone say when I was young that when my mother gave birth to me, the process was not easy and quite dangerous, so when my father was invited, he left the original Baoshi kiln and went to your kiln to become a master of porcelain and apprentices. It was because he remembered this kindness. The Ma family of Xinghua Lane has the Ma family of Xinghua Lane. Tutor, our Mu Ping Lane Chen family also has our appointment. When the courtyard is empty, chairs can be gathered together? Ma Kushuan was silent for a moment and said, then you are mistaken. I don't think about avenging them one day just because they gave birth to me. I just want to repay my kindness and repay this debt, so I just follow they are settled. So you come to seek revenge. This is a deadlock between us. Why did I earn that bag of money when I was a teenager and deliberately leak the news that you and Ning Yao were hiding in the Immortal tomb? Could it be that I would covet that little gold? Fine copper coins? Why do I clearly think that you and I are fellow travelers and that everyone of the same age in Liju Cave Sky looks at you the most? But I want to deliberately aggravate the cause and effect of both parties, just so that you and I can meet one day and know life and death as soon as possible. Don't, if you are just a little sloppy, no matter who dies, you can settle the grievances between the two families together. As a result, your performance today makes me very... Ma Kushuan paused briefly before slowly saying two words, disappointed. Qin Pingon said, Ma Kushuan, it's not me who is struggling but you, because you have never recognized and accepted your own roots. Deep in your heart, you hate your own clear origins and you can't see tomorrow. Destiny, that's why you became your only friend with Yu Shiwu, who was in the same situation. Neither accepting where you came from nor finding your whereabouts, you became a rootless duckweed in this world. Since you were wrong yesterday, you will do more wrong tomorrow. So you have been waiting for today. Having said this, Qin Pingon took a deep breath, laughed and rolled up his sleeves. I know this feeling because I have walked through this myself. You are right, we are indeed on the same journey, at least on the same path in life. There's a long way to go and it's all the same. Ma Kushuan said, it's a pity that we are not destined to be friends. Let's go all out and let the long-awaited today be happy. Don't become the kind of Xianxia wine in your wine shop. Whoever drinks it frowns, I drink it. However, I still found someone to bring 2 pots with me, it was too cheating. Qin Pingon smiled and said, this kind of thing is not coming from someone who loves to drink. Drinking depends on the place. In the wine shop, you only need to take out a piece of snow to spend, pay with one hand and deliver the goods and drink on the spot. After finishing it, I found a friend to help me and I walked from the Great Wall of Sword Chi to Daoist Mountain, brought it to Aquarius Island and delivered it to you in Jinwu Mountain. Can the same drink have the same taste? What you are expecting is not a snowflake. The taste of money. Ma Kushuan asked with a smile. Why are you so interested in talking all of a sudden? Qin Pingon pointed to the Zhou Mi, who was more than 2 feet tall. Aren't you trying to see how long this dear friend can last? You are in the immortal realm now. If you invite an illusion from the 14th realm, you will definitely not want to follow me. If you waste half a sentence, then I can avoid fighting and postpone it. If you are a thug with an Ascension Realm cultivation level with your temper and face, you can at most bite the bullet and talk for a few words, and you will interrupt me and I will do the same. Seems that you are good at fighting and retreating. Now it seems that at most it is a fake ascension. In the Immortal Realm there are some tricks of the Ascension Realm. You can light a stick of incense and descend to the real world in person. The duration is quite long, so you only have the slightest chance. Not urgent. Ma Kushuan clicked his tongue and said, as expected of a sword cultivator, he is really cheap. A heavy snow fell in the sky, and the snowflakes were so dense that it was unclear whether they were falling from the sky or rising. Ma Kushuan heard that sword cultivators on the Great Wall of Sword Chi, regardless of their level of realm, would not have a grave after death, so naturally there would be no custom of worshipping ancestors. In this snow, the city head is like a tomb, and the endless snowflakes are like countless white paper money scattered to pay homage to the heroic spirits. People become ancient people and the earth becomes relics. All gone. Ma Kushuan smiled brightly and shouted, Qin Pingon. Qin Pingan asked doubtfully. Huh? In an instant visions arose, and the entire sky condensed into a thunder pool, with a mighty sound, like a great monk in seclusion leading to a catastrophe. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning as thick as a mountain peak separated from it, and turned several times in midair. The straight line instantly became more condensed and slender, and the Taoist charm contained in it was even more amazing, like a golden flying sword hitting Qin Pingan. When the golden thunder was about to hit Qin Pingan's head, there was a shaking sound near the thunder pool in the sky. Qin Pingan didn't know whether he had no way to hide or wanted to weigh the weight of this sky thunder, but he didn't move. Punched upwards and handed it out hard, the tip of the sword exploded with a bang and countless golden sparks burst out within 100 feet, making Qin Pingan feel like he was in a firehouse where swords were forged. But this sword, or a thunder from the sky, is no less powerful than a full-strength strike from a Jade Pu realm swordsman. But Ma Kuxuan didn't use a trace of spiritual energy at all. There was no talisman in his hand to drive him, and there was no need to recite a spell to induce thunder. There were 5 colors of thunder in total, which coincided with the cycle of the 5 elements. They were constantly differentiated in the thunder pool, and fell on the city head one after another without giving Qin Pingan a chance to breathe. 5 thunders striking the top is a Taoist term, because it is too powerful and deeply rooted in people's hearts. The common people in the city as well as the green forest heroes in the rivers and lakes always like to say that if they violate their oath, the shadow of the cloud above their head will appear and 5 thunders will strike from the sky. Ma Kuxuan had already contracted his earth veins and moved to another place, far away from the battlefield. He smiled and said, "Thousands of magic techniques in the world are mastered by Qi practitioners, but magical powers are my family's business." After resisting dozens of thunderbolts, Qin Pingan's fists were bloody and his bones were visible. His whole arm was numb and he had to shake his arm. A long string of electric lights was still entangled around his arm, like a dozen snow-white electric snakes being killed by Qin Pingan. He shook to the ground. Qin Pingan was a little surprised. Why didn't Ma Kuxuan take the opportunity to throw out a few more thunder magic powers? In the previous words, when talking about the Xianxia mansion in Longhu Mountain, Ma Kuxuan seemed to be arrogant. He did not think highly of the 5 thunder methods of the Xianxia mansion, and even felt that he was qualified to teach Zhao Tianlai the true meaning of the thunder method. Ma Kuxuan, no matter how high-minded Kuxuan was, he did not feel that he was superior to Zhao Tianlai in terms of magical attainments. It was just that Ma Kuxuan was a reincarnation of the gods and was from the lay department of the ancient heaven. He regarded himself as the authentic sect of thunder methods, so there was no problem. Ma Kuxuan said with a smile, "I didn't even give you a chance to breathe. I'm so generous, but I want to take the opportunity to sharpen my fist skills and temper my body. You 10-level warriors are really amazing. I envy you to the extreme." As he spoke, the thunder pond heavenly tribulation was getting deeper and deeper, overwhelming and suffocating. The vast thunder pond that had accumulated countless ancient Taoist meanings was like a deep pool filled with water. Ma Kuxuan used his great magical power to separate a ditch and lead it to Qin Pingan. It creates a pattern that looks like the mouth of a well is poured with river water. In one go, thunder and lightning with Taoism as thick as liquid because the thunder fell too frequently. The thunder was connected and connected continuously, and the sound of thunder with slight intervals turned into continuous rolling thunder, just like beating a drum in the clouds, and someone touching the ear it stuck to the drum surface. Not to mention Qin Pingan, who was in the game, was so shocked that Ma Kuxuan felt a little tight in his chest. He stretched out his hand, gently rubbed his ears and sneered, "The illusion of the heart is ultimately a fake. It turns out that a great wall of sword chi has been shattered by hundreds of lightning strikes. The bright red mustard figure stands in the ruins, continuing to bear the catastrophe with both fists. With each punch delivered, there are hundreds of millions of people around it. The magnificent scene of thousands of fires and splendid scenes, it is hard to tell whether it is a sea of fire or a vast array of stars in the endless void. Do you still dare to say that you only use martial arts to fight against the enemy? Are you really not going to use shrinking techniques and sword escape techniques? I would like to see how long Grandmaster Jije's pure qi can last." According to Ma Kuxuan's calculations, when Qin Pingan takes a breath, before the old and new energies are connected, he will be rewarded with another magic hand. For Taoist monks, the human body is originally a blessed land, and the flesh, blood, muscles and bones are the mountains and rivers. The so-called practice is to use a bridge of immortality to connect to the cave and sky, and temper the spiritual energy inside. The Buddhist saying that human life is rare is never false. All sentient beings in the world regard humans as the leader of all spirits. So why do all the enlightened monsters on the earth strive to be refined into human bodies? Naturally, it is profitable. With a human body, cultivating Taoism can achieve twice the result with half the effort. To put it simply, in a sense, the human race is a free spirit. The scale of this heavenly tribulation thunder pond can theoretically completely suppress a Jade Pu realm sword cultivator, kill him and turn him into powder. Even his soul will be wiped out. There is no need to talk about the afterlife. Even if the great monks on the top of the mountain can enter and leave the underworld in Fengdu, they will still be in vain if they want to save the situation. With this unique magical power, Ma Kexuan's manpower is already the ultimate in killing Yu Pu or seriously injuring an immortal. Once he asks for more, even if it is just the slightest, Ma Kexuan must pay in a strictly reciprocal and uncompromising manner. At the price of the difference, you step into the divine way, return to the throne of God and become a god. And this trend is irreversible. Therefore, if he goes a step further and steals a little more of the secrets of heaven, Ma Kexuan will completely abandon the 7 emotions and 6 desires, no longer bound by cause and effect, even if he can preserve the memory of this life. So this is a paradox. If you want to use more divine ways to help yourself with great magical powers and be able to kill an immortal with a crushing posture, Ma Kexuan will no longer be Ma Kexuan. Now that this road has come to an end for the time being, Ma Kexuan prepared several gifts for Qin Pingan on another road as a way to entertain guests. At the bottom of the collapse, golden thunder and lightning were swaying wildly in the flying snow. When the manpower was finally exhausted, the powerful fist power of the owner in the bright red robe showed no sign of weakening. Is it possible that Qin Pingan can really eat all the thunder pools in one go? Ma Kexuan asked curiously. Are all Jijia warriors so powerful? Regarding the practice of joints, Ma Kexuan is an expert and has a very high vision. However, he has never been involved in martial arts and knows very little about it. Zhou Mi on the side replied, because he is at the Qi Xing level, which no one has ever seen before, and is uniquely blessed to be able to carry it for a longer period of time. Ma Kexuan twitched his lips and said, if you have the ability, just endure it. It will be a good thing. Zhou Mi is non-committal. Ma Kexuan laughed loudly and slapped his knee. When we get out of trouble later, this guy will definitely complain to me, your methods are too mean. Right? Zhou Mi reminded, we are in the formation, it's a little early to be happy now. After all, this barbarian Wenhai who was invited by Ma Kexuan to support him was an existence that Ma Kexuan visualized using the ancient secret method and then forged in the furnace. It was equivalent to using the 12 ancient high-ranking gods at the same time. The two's natal magical powers are far beyond the comparison of ordinary puppets. It was named by Ma Kexuan after calling soul, which is a secret contract with heaven, which is not bad at all. Zhou Mi smiled and said, people strive for a breath and gods receive a stick of incense. It really suits the occasion. On the ground, Qin Pingan's boxing technique was so simple that he had almost no moves at all and he was out of his ordinary. The peak of the fist intention is even more vast, like a who is not subject to incense, breaking the shackles and walking in the world. Ma Kexuan's face was gleaming in the golden light and snow. He stared intently at the battlefield where he seemed to be an invincible warrior who faced only the sky. There are thousands of spells on the mountain which are dazzling. They are beautiful to look at, but in Ma Kexuan's eyes, it seems that after all, it is not as satisfying as relying on his fists alone. It's a pity that when he approached Yushirwu he had some intentions at first, but in the end he couldn't bear to take action against this friend, so he came out to occupy the magpie's nest and resurrect the soul through the dead body. Ma Kexuan couldn't help but sigh, what a monster. Zhou Mi said, compared to Ascension Realm monks, there are only a few warriors of the same generation who can reach the first level of God. They have fewer opportunities to compete with each other, and the number of punches is even less. Ma Kexuan said, if you put yourself in his shoes, even if the combat power on paper is equivalent facing this thunder pool, I wouldn't be able to walk so casually like him. Zhou Mi said, it's calm. The existence of heavenly calamity is not only a pass that practitioners regard as dangerous, but also a fate that cannot be escaped. The dangers and horrors among them can only be known by those monks in history who had no choice but to fight and die because they could not escape the disaster. In addition, there is a deeper truth. The existence of a heavenly calamity can reduce merit and cause and effect in the world. If one is not good at studying Taoism and ends up in a situation where the body dies and Taoism disappears, it is just a matter of returning the property to the Lord. However, if one successfully overcomes the tribulation, it is the benefit of the Taoism. It can help the Taoist people to escape the tribulation. The Taoist heart will be clear and the Taoist body will not be broken, stained in the world of mortals. Otherwise, why would those who have attained the Tao preach the secrets of heaven with great earnestness and sincerity, emphasizing that one must wait until the merits are perfected before he can attain the Tao and then have the opportunity to attain immortality? But if we say that the heavenly tribulation is man-made, there is a huge difference. If you are not careful, you will be struck by the 5 thunders of the heavenly tribulation, cutting off the 3 flowers on your head, and destroying the 5 human qi that were finally condensed. What Ma Kuxuan wants to do is to make the young hermit official and the owner of Lulu Mountain, who has done many feats, have all his merits and deeds cut off, and lose some kind of protection from God's will. This move can reverse the situation and make Qin Pingan temporarily lose his time. Regardless of whether you rely on flying swords or other means, here you are mainly against the guests. I will follow the same pattern and mainly against the guests. In addition, Ma Kuxuan has more magical effects. Ma Kuxuan looked at that guy intently and murmured to himself, I want to cut off all your merits. I don't want it to last forever, just for a short time. When a person's merits are gone, he becomes a bad guy with bad luck. As the old saying goes, people with strong luck can deceive ghosts, and ghosts with bad luck can deceive others. This is the truth. Why would the gods of mountains and rivers in this world be willing to pay homage to someone passing by? Or show up to greet him or protect him secretly? Why does the Qinghuang temple in this world have a single booklet with names recorded in Jubi? Everything is due to the ancient times. There have been some changes in the ritual system. Among them, there is a new heaven rule. Qi practitioners and mountain and water gods, who have meritorious deeds for the people, will be added to the law. Merits in the world are divided into yin and yang. What is yin virtue? It's like ringing in the ears, which is heard only by oneself but not by others. There is often an admonition that it is better to cultivate virtue than to gain wealth and fame. The word zhong reveals the secret of heaven again, and the heart is the field of blessing. The fields are barren, the water sources are drying up, and there is no talk of next year's harvest. This is not an empty talk to deceive people and do good things. It only talks about a certain lineage of Taoism. It is extremely strict to accept disciples and preach. Why does it require the disciples to have 3,000 merits and 800 good deeds? People have the heart to follow the Tao, the ambition to become an immortal, and the wish to reach the sky, but they still cannot understand the fate of right and wrong. The common man meets noble people in the market and on the road of life and never misses them. So this fate is not only obtained through human effort, but also has fate hidden in it. He picked up gold and silver in his own fields. If you can make it big and wide, turning your own field into the whole world, it is Taoism. Zhou Mi suddenly said, Qin Pingan's merits are too little, far lower than expected and unreasonably low. I guess he encountered something and took the initiative to disperse. Ma Kuxuan looked indifferent and said with a smile, It doesn't matter. How much merit he has will not affect the overall situation. I just want a clear and refreshing result. This method of cutting 3 flowers but 5 qi with one hand means that if you have too much, you will not retreat. But I want to make up for it, smash a numerological hole in him and see what he uses to fill the gap. Ma Kuxuan stood up and said, That's it. There is a thunder pool as vast as a giant lake hanging high in the sky. The water surface has been reduced to a thin layer, which can at most support several cycles of 5 elements thunder. Zhou Mi nodded, Please issue a decree. Ma Kuxuan did not dare to be careless and spoke a few words from his heart. This one Hai Zhou Mi obeyed the order and used the Zhou Mi true body's magical power that he had never had the opportunity to show off on the human battlefield. Without giving Qin Pingan a chance to breathe, an invisible magical power attached itself to Qin Pingan. At that moment Qin Pingan's body sank. There was a huge pit in the depression on the ground, covered with dense spider webs. A pure martial artist only does not need to take a breath until he has reached the final level. This is why the same level of end is still the source of the difference between clouds and mud. Cause and effect itself has nothing to do with good or evil, but cause and effect will bring different pros and cons. So depending on the amount of blessings and the depth of qi, the completeness and lack of merit and luck of a person, there will be a fight, intertwined, each increasing or decreasing and canceling each other out. Finally set on a certain level, similar to becoming the current face of a person when the fortune teller sees it. Qin Pingon, who had been punching leisurely and walking calmly, frowned and instantly raised his arms and shoulders, as if he wanted to shake away the foreign objects attached to his body. Just such an action caused gusts of wind to roll across the earth like thunder, causing a large crater to expand several times, covering dozens of miles in almost flat ground. As for the few thunderbolts, they were casually shot away by Qin Pingon without any pain. Qin Pingon shook his sleeves and looked up at Ma Kuxuan, who was walking to the cliff edge. Ma Kuxuan's laughter came to my ears. Take it. Ma Kuxuan smiled and said, I heard that Shan Zhuqian likes to be reasonable and a good person most in his life. Then let me let you know the truth. What is a good person also needs to pay a price. Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. I like to hear this. Turns out you are not bragging. You are worthy of being a confidant. Ma Kuxuan pointed at Qin Pingan's shoulder. Every master is carrying a ghost on his back. I'm just manifesting it. You have enough merit before, so of course you won't notice this weirdness. There is often a saying in the market that people who lack yang qi will have a cold neck and a cold back. There's something behind you, I don't know if it's a human or a ghost, right? Those who have gone through the world of martial arts and have stained their hands with countless blood may have strong bones and strong evil spirits at the moment, but it doesn't matter. When they get old and weak and their spirit is weak, let's see what the situation is like. Oh, why do people who are in the world of rivers and lakes keep saying that it will not bring harm to their families? I want to wash my hands in a golden basin. Why are officials most afraid of being implicated in having their homes confiscated? This is because they are afraid of the consequences without knowing the cause. Those who died directly by your hands, those who died indirectly because of you, those who stopped at Shujian Lake on the way, those who are permanently stationed in this great sword Qi wall, no matter they deserve to die, died in vain. Humans, ghosts or ghosts, the demon clan gods are all on your back now anyway. Qin Pingon was indeed pressed to the point where his knees were slightly bent and his body was stooped, showing an overwhelmed posture. This was by no means a lie. Ma Kuxuan asked with a smile. Have you ever seen with your own eyes the pain of climbing over mountains in the profession of porter? It's the kind of coolie who carries luggage and snakes along the mountain with the road. I think you are similar to them now. Qin Pingon asked calmly. Have you ever seen a woman carrying her husband? Ma Kuxuan was stunned. Qin Pingon said, I have seen it. Do you know how they use bamboo shoot shells? Ma Kuxuan was speechless and sighed. Let me bite the bullet and temper my temper. It's rare for me to say a human word. Qin Pingon, you shouldn't take the suffering of others in this world so seriously. Zhou reminded, don't delay. Ma Kuxuan nodded, then continue and gather 3 axes. Qin Pingon, who was wearing a bright red robe, stretched out a palm, apparently signaling Ma Kuxuan to be polite and just let the horse come over. Na Zhou's expression suddenly changed slightly. Ma Kuxuan asked doubtfully, can't it be shaped? There was a monk from the 14th realm who had no idea and helped Qin Pingon set up some kind of amulet early. Zhou shook his head and said, it needs to be weirder. First use human power to create heavenly calamities, and then use secret methods to show cause and effect. What next? Are we going to imitate the inner demons of Daoist? Qin Pingon sneered and said, if this is really the case as I expected, then your 3-axe attack is really extraordinary. Ordinary immortals may not be able to withstand it. Even before Ma Kuxuan made a move, the immortals who were fighting against him were probably already dead or injured. The originally dark sky opened a thin line, a hole was opened, and with a flash of golden light, a bright sword light fell straight down. The point of the sword is nowhere else. It was Qin Pingon. Don't kill others, only kill yourself. The bright red robe on his body had fallen off on its own, and he was 1 step ahead and swept away to another place. A man wearing a green shirt and carrying a sword walked out of Ma's ancestral hall and came to this world. Finally we meet. Standing there, spreading his hands, the bright red robe was put on by itself. Qin Pingon smiled and said, it's not easy, you can actually force me to reveal my true body to meet you here. Sword of Coming Chapter 12:18. Chapter 12:18. Go to the mountain. The air in the mountains is still cool after the rain. The days are long and nothing happens, and Yen sits leisurely. The people at the table at the foot of the mountain, one big and one small, all had their legs crossed, eating melon seeds and chatting about various things, just passing the time leisurely. The two of them are good brothers who are famous for their high ambitions in Lulu Mountain. There is no need to cultivate Tao and no need to practice boxing. Both of us are top-notch geniuses. Leave aside geniuses, people who can climb mountains and practice Taoism with the same physical ability, must avoid certain potholes on the way to practice, such as the Talisman Road. The threshold is high, the money is high, and the guidance of a master is also needed. Otherwise, if you are not careful, you will be killed. You will waste your life, talk about immortality and talk about soaring. This makes a woman afraid of marrying the wrong man and entering the wrong profession. It's absolutely true. What Brother Defeng said is absolutely true. What he said is absolutely true. Some pits are shallower. If you have suffered a loss, you can still climb out if the opportunity is bad. But some pits are very deep. If you jump in, you will not be able to climb out. What you are most afraid of is encountering a bottomless pit with no bottom. Brother Defeng is one of the few martial arts masters in Aquarius continent. He learns martial arts and practices boxing. The threshold for this profession is not high, so it is not a trap, right? This is not called a pit. Zheng Dafeng nodded and said, it's a cliff. Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes and said nothing. It would be unconscionable if he echoed this. Zheng Dafeng said with a smile. Of course, the number of people who learn martial arts outside the mountains is far more than the number of Taoists in the mountains, but you can't think that learning martial arts is not a trap just because of this. You can't see Qin Pingon and Chao Ci either. I'm young, I'm high level, I'm flying in the sky. I think it's so easy to get into this industry. At this time, on the mountain road not far away, an old immortal with immortal style and Taoism came. He had 3 long beards and elegant Taoist clothes. He was Lu Yong, the master of the Qinghu Palace in Tongyi's Hao. The old man holds a fly whisk in his hand and walks steadily, making him look very majestic. In the words of my old cook, if there is not a land on the mountain, and if there is not a county magistrate in Gongmen, there is no way he can escape from this kind of momentum. Qin Lingjun took a closer look, stood up hurriedly, shook his sleeves and strode forward. Hey, isn't this Brother Lu? There are only a few visitors here. The old man stopped, nodded and said with a smile, come here uninvited, nagging. Then Lu Yong added, I saw fellow Taoist Jing Qing and Grand Master Zheng from a distance. What a talker, he has the aura of Qingxiao and he sits like a white jade figure. Zheng Dafeng was not a janitor now, so he didn't get up to entertain guests. Hearing Lu Yong's comment, he was greatly impressed. He was indeed a real person. He did have some true knowledge and insights, and he told the truth to everyone. Qin Lingjun sighed like the mountain master. You just say some polite words. Who are you looking down on? Brother Lu comes to our Luapa mountain and he still needs to say hello to others? This is a shabby and dishonest thing to say, and it seems that we are here. Are you snobbish and don't care about old feelings at all? It doesn't matter if you slap me in the face. Who of us is following whom? At worst, we can just drink 2 cups at the wine table and it will be over. Slapping my master in the face is not allowed, absolutely not allowed. Lu Yong laughed loudly, changed his position and held his fist for Jiang Hu, shaking it vigorously. It's true that I'm being pretentious. I went back to the table and punished myself with 3 bowls first. Qin Lingjun asked from the bottom of his heart. Brother Lu is a very busy man now. What is it? The letter didn't explain clearly. I have to climb the mountain in person? Could it be that I encountered some difficulties? Can you tell me in private? I will help you if you can. If you don't help, you are your grandson. Lu Yong hesitated for a moment, but chose to say straightforwardly, fellow Taoist Jingqing, to be honest, I have a direct disciple named Zhao Zhu. I'm not just bragging. Zhao Zhu's Taoist qualifications are not bad and his character is even better. Yes, I'm just wondering if I can help this apprentice get a seat at the back of your Jisa Peak Patriarch's Hall, so that he can be a guest who can sit in on the proceedings. In this way, when I take it off in the future with a heavy burden on my shoulders, I plan to take care of myself in old age, so it becomes more and more justifiable for Zhao Zhu to inherit the position of palace master. For such a big matter, just sending a letter from Feijian does not seem sincere enough, just like Qinghu Palace giving orders to Lulu Mountain. Lu Yong didn't think he had such a big face, so he had to make this trip in person to meet Master Qin and discuss the matter carefully. Well, I have some confidence. Qin Lingjun rubbed his chin, thought carefully for a moment and said with a serious expression, Zhao Zhao, I remember that I met him and he is a good person. If he is just an ordinary guest, it is not difficult at all, but it must be said that we have a position in the ancestral hall. Yes, this is no small matter. I can't help the mountain master and agree randomly, but I can guarantee two things. One is that when the mountain master returns to the mountain, I will go to the mountain master in private to help Zhao. Speak good words to the child and help him. Furthermore, if the mountain master thinks this matter is feasible and really wants to include it in the Jisa Peak discussion process and discuss it in the ancestral hall, I will definitely be the first to support it without any hesitation. Lu Yong thanked him sincerely and asked in a low voice, Master Qin is not in the mountain now. Qin Lingjun hummed and said, I'm going down the mountain. My master is always so busy. The boy in green chuckled, that's why we can be so free. You must make no mistakes when you are busy and make no mistakes when you are free. All these require real ability. The old master smiled and said, the atmosphere in the mountain is so good, Taoist fellow Jingqing deserves a lot of credit. Qin Lingjun silently memorized this truth. It must be a good word of advice so that he can argue with some stupid girl who only teaches him how to do nothing. Lu Yong, who planned to live here for a while, met Jing Dafeng and chatted for a few words. They had a similar atmosphere. One of them praised Lu Yong. He has a fairy spirit which is rare and he is more humane and valuable. One said that Brother Jing worked hard and achieved great results, but regarded his fame as dirt and had fewer desires than a Taoist. The two sides talked more and they became more and more compatible, so they made an appointment for a drink. Mr. Lu signed with Taoist Master Xianwei again, and Qin Lingjun led him up the mountain to stay at an elegant house. The relationship between Lulu Mountain and Qinghu Palace is somewhat similar. Yamashita's worldly kinship relationship between two villages is a bit stronger than ordinary allies. Before Qin Lingjun came down the mountain, he saw another unfamiliar face. Zheng Dafeng clicked his tongue and said in surprise, what a good day it is today, all the guests are here. I saw a graceful woman on the mountain road, coming slowly. She was like a fairy sister whose feathers were often smoky. After taking a closer look, I found a mole on the tip of her nose. Far from being a pity for a beautiful jade, it actually had a finishing touch of beauty. Zheng Dafeng hurriedly straightened his clothes, planning to go and meet the unidentified woman in person. She was the former janitor, wasn't she still the janitor? We in Luoyuashan are not willing to burn bridges across rivers. After meeting the woman, she directly handed out a certificate. Zheng Dafeng took it and was quite surprised after confirming that it was not a forgery. It was actually a customs clearance document issued directly by the Chinese Confucian Temple. I heard from the gossip that over the years, the Confucian Temple has only taken out more than 100 copies. Generally speaking, the Qi practitioners who receive this honor are mostly local monks in the wilderness, as well as spies who have been placed in the wilderness by Houran Tianxia and have not returned home for a long time. The name written on the pass is Xianxia and the road name is Yunhu. However, his place of origin and sect were not stated. The female cultivator smiled and said, I dare not hide it. I actually come from the wild world. In the past, the dojo was located in Jinsui City. Now I am a monk who has not yet been included in the genealogy of Baidi City. Zheng Dafeng suddenly realized it and said that this Taoist name looked familiar. He turned out to be the city lord of Jinsui City. A genuine city lord in the immortal realm. Nowadays the surname is Zheng, which makes sense. Qingjia said in extremely mellow Dali Mandarin, this trip to Aquarius continent is only for two things. One is to follow Mr. Zheng's decree, find Gu Kan, and assist him in establishing the sect with all his strength. The other is to come to see a certain person. A senior from his hometown can trace his origins. This senior can be regarded as the founder of our Jinsui City. Jinsui City can be what it is today and Qingjia can be where it is today. It is all thanks to him. Recognizing the ancestors and returning to the clan is the meaning of the title. Now that Jinquiqing belongs to the vassal sect of Baidi City, and the matter of returning to the clan has been settled, it is even more necessary for me to come here and recognize my ancestor. Zheng Dafeng knew this clearly. Xiao Imo did indeed leave 6 holes of Dao in the wild world, but one time when everyone got together to chat, according to Xiao Imo, There seemed to be only one line of incense left there. It is possible that the incense has been cut off. Logically speaking, Xiaomo's remaining incense should not be from Jin Suiqing. Even the Qigong practitioners here in Haoran Tianxia have heard of such a famous sect in Wild Golden Suiqing. For example, Zheng Dafeng knew that this sect was famous for having many female cultivators, good robes and beautiful clothes. Female nuns wearing cassocks are even better. For 10 days and a half they changed one thing every day and never brought the same one. Although in the end they still ended up in the same place, they had to take off their clothes. Just thinking about it can make the bachelors laugh. Zheng Dafeng wiped his mouth and explained with a smile. Xiaomo is not on the mountain and has gone on a long trip. But he will be back soon. I believe fellow Taoist Qingjia will not wait long. Qingjia smiled and said, I haven't had time to ask my Taoist friends for their names yet. Zheng Dafeng said, what a coincidence, our surname is Zheng. We were the same family 500 years ago. My sister is a few years older. Since we are both surnamed Zheng, it is not appropriate to call me Xiao Zheng. Just call me Xiao Feng. Zheng Dafeng invited, I would like to invite Taoist fellow Yuanhu to go to the humble residence for a visit. The place is simple. The customs in the wild world are not to be disrespectful. What's more, Qingjia is still the lord of a city. He has been mediating between Yangji and Feifei, who are both the throne demons, for many years. Now he has followed Jing Juzhong. Qingjia didn't feel the need for herself and the man in front of her to be arrogant and submissive, so she directly interrupted the sloppy man's greasy words and said with a smile, I won't disturb Dao Yuzheng's residence. I would like to ask if I can go hiking and take a walk. I only had a cursory glance at the scenery on the mountain road, and I have really admired Master Yingwen's dojo for a long time. Zheng Dafeng immediately changed his mind, patted his chest and said, it's easy to talk about. I can walk down all the roads, big and small, long and short, in this mountain with my eyes closed. I will take you up the mountain. The immortal captain was speechless. Qingjia probably never imagined that he would meet such a person at the foot of the mountain before he entered the mountain. The Luo mountain in her impression was not like this. After all, the dojo was founded by the young Yin Guan himself, so it should be a well-guarded and orderly mountain top. Because he didn't know who the man named Zheng was in Luopa mountain, what his background was, and what his relationship was with Qin Yingguan, Qingjia had no choice but to follow him up the stairs and climb the mountain slowly. Fortunately, the trip was worthwhile. When Qingjia got her wish and truly set foot on Lulu mountain, the discomfort caused by the man around her was largely diluted. After recording the files and names with the Taoist priest just now, before Qingjia formally moved up the mountain and past the mountain gate archway, he stopped and took a deep breath, looked up at the plaque and bowed. If you are not a monk from the Wild Demon clan, you will never be able to truly understand the complex and heavy thoughts of Qingjia and the others. Because he has never been a true enemy of the Great Wall of Sword Qi and the last hidden official. Qin Lingjun sent Brother Lu to his residence. On the way back to the foot of the mountain, he saw Zheng Dafeng hooking up with a random girl there. He felt sad for a moment. Brother Dafeng, he has been single for many years. It's hard. Qin Lingjun sneaked over to Xianwei first and asked in a low voice, who is it? Taoist Xianwei answered from the bottom of his heart. It's a foreign Taoist friend. His surname is Zheng, his name is Qingjia, and his Taoist name is Yuanhu. He seems to be here to see Gukan. After all, unlike Zheng Dafeng, Xianwei couldn't see much inside information from the genealogy. He never wondered about the visitor's background. Qin Lingjun nodded, thinking he understood. It is estimated that this woman is the homeless wild cultivator of Xianxia who has no way to seek refuge. She can't find the gate of the temple in Baidi City in Middle-earth even with the pig's head, because she heard about the porcelain relationship between her master and that little slug somewhere. Because of the relationship, I just want to ask my master to help me soothe my cheeks, say a few good words to Gukan and make an introduction? The boy in green sighed softly. It was not easy either. Climbing together, listening to Zheng Dafeng's chatter, he changed his ways to be attentive and approachable. Qin Lingjun, who was walking behind, clenched his fists with both hands and pressed them hard against his cheeks to suppress his laughter. Passing by an open house, there was an old man lying on a wicker chair in the courtyard. He was resting his mind with his eyes closed. He was breathing long and seemed to be in a light sleep. He was holding a yellow cattail leaf fan on his abdomen. As he passed the open gate of the courtyard, Qingjia happened to see a scene out of the corner of his eye. A flower that seemed to have been persuaded by the spring breeze to travel far away from the branch, swayed and fell on the old man's forehead. She took a few more glances. The old man is similar to the one next to him named Sheng. He seems to be a martial artist and his level is definitely not low. Qingjia's realm was high enough and he could see that the old man who was in a trance like a monk was not pretending to be asleep, but was really calmed down and wandering around. It is rare for a martial artist to be like this, but for Qingjia it is not that big of a fuss. After all, what she has seen and heard is the affairs of high-ranking people in the wild world. The man named Xing next to me, even if he were 20 years younger, I believe his appearance would not be much better. But the old man in the hospital, if his age were doubled and based on his magnanimity he would be a handsome man? Xing Dafeng rubbed his hands. Was it accidental or intentional? The old chef really has a skill. Will Jiang Taigong take the bait if he is fishing? This trick can be learned. Looking at Xing Dafeng who was eager to try, Qin Lingjun felt that he had to be a staunch friend for once, and said from the bottom of his heart, "Brother Dafeng, listen to my advice, don't learn this craft. Trust me once and the result will only be. It's just the opposite. No matter how bad the old cook's appearance is, when he shuts up and doesn't speak he still looks a bit like a dog. If it were that fallen flower that hit you on the head in the eyes of a woman it would feel like. He can say no?" Xing Dafeng said with a smile, "Let's talk. I'm all ears." Qin Lingjun lowered his voice and said, "You fell into a trap." Xing Dafeng held the boy in green's head and said, "You can use metaphors now, you're quite good at talking." Qin Lingjun sighed, feeling sorry for himself and said, "It's true that my words of advice are offensive to my ears." Xing Dafeng lost interest all of a sudden, so he made an excuse and asked Qin Lingjun to lead the way. The man looked gloomy, his back was drawn and he went down the mountain alone. Zhou Xian often behaves like this now, treating sleep as a form of spiritual practice, and everyone is accustomed to it. According to the intelligence leaked by Xiaomi Li, it seems that the old cook has arranged a fight with the good mountain master. The location is in the capital city of Nanyuan State, which is inside his blessed land. This winter the fight will happen when it snows. Xing Dafeng walked out of the bluestone path, a spiritual path to the main peak of Jiling Peak, which can be climbed up or down. After hesitating for a while, Xing Dafeng walked towards the top of the mountain. He turned his head and looked at the foot of the mountain. Behind a pillar of the mountain gate archway, there would be a bamboo chair. Sitting on it was a fake Taoist priest who was not even allowed to teach him his private jar. In fact, his name is Nianjing, Xianwei is just his name, and he also gave himself the name Xuxuan, to travel around the world. He was abducted by the mountain master from the Great Li capital city, so those who followed the mountain master in Luopa Mountain were accustomed to calling him Xianwei Taoist master. Only when Qin Lingjun was familiar with him would he deliberately turn Xuanxu upside down and jokingly call him Taoist master Xuanxu, pretending to be Xuanxu. Xianwei's realm is not high and his face is not thin. He has been wandering around the world for many years and he is still ashamed of this? On the contrary, I like what fellow Taoist Jingqing said. Taoist Xianwei watches the door every day in Tianqing, hiding a book in each sleeve. When there is no one around he reads the more serious one. When there is someone around he reads the more serious one. It's raining. What else can I do? Just stay indoors and take shelter from the rain. At most I held an umbrella and pretended to sit at the gate of the mountain. I was as cold as a quail. I couldn't sit there for long before I went back to the house to read a book. According to a rough estimate, it rained for 9 consecutive days in the vast world. Qingming Tianxia about 5 days. In the Western Buddhist kingdom it may be 4 days. A day and a half in the wild world. Colorful world half a day. Xing Dafeng originally thought that Xianwei would inexplicably break into several realms during this world reign. It is not unusual to break through the realm, but it is strange not to break through the realm. But things are just so weird. I never thought that Xianwei's realm was so stable, that it was unreasonable and untouchable. The rain stopped now. The Taoist priest was in the second realm when he came to Luopa Mountain, and he is still in the second realm now. After all, cultivation is a family matter. It is not easy for Xing Dafeng to remind him of anything, and it is not appropriate to talk too much. It is often said at the foot of the mountain that one word reveals the secret of heaven, but on the mountain there is a taboo of, it is a pity to reveal it. Xing Dafeng held the back of his head with both hands and swayed his shoulders as he walked up the mountain. The mountain breeze blew on his face, feeling refreshed. Hey, since Miss Sen's graceful figure is not seen on the mountain road, She must be practicing boxing on the white jade square on the top of the mountain. The woman is punching, tossing and turning, ups and downs. How can it not look good? Slowly walking up the stairs, Xing Dafeng straightened his clothes, spit in his hands and smoothed his hair from his temples. In the past his master didn't like to chat with him. Senior brother Li Er didn't know if he was pretending to pass on the imperial edict or because he saw his junior brother was more handsome than him and deliberately made disgusting remarks to him. He said that the reason why Xing Dafeng was not good at learning martial arts, praying to gods, was ineffective and he was devout. Being dishonest means not being able to succeed at a high level and not working at a low level, and you end up in a situation where you can't rely on both sides. You can't learn anything and you can't be good at martial arts. Just because you are a soft-eared person with an uncertain mind, and you don't know what you really want. People who want and pursue what they want. Over the years, in Feishing City under the colorful world, Xing Dafeng chewed these heavy words over and over again, and knew that the truth was like this, otherwise he would not have thought of building a temple next to Dadu as a shrine. But deep down Xing Dafeng is still lazy. Not much better than Zhou Xian, who thinks about lunch and dinner after breakfast every day, and still thinks about making midnight snack after dinner. The common man wants to do what he wants. When he goes out, there are others who are flattering him and chasing his butt. When he returns home, he has a group of wives and concubines, a mountain of gold and silver. What Daoists want is to climb up one level at a time, to be like a land who can prolong life, and to be immortal, to soar mistily, hoping to live as long as heaven and earth. Xing Dafeng took all this very lightly. Just think of it as a dog that can't change its habit of eating shit. Xing Dafeng climbed to the top of Jilin Peak first. He didn't see Tsin Yuanji, so he planned to go to the back mountain again. The little girl named Chao Yuan seemed to be shy every time he saw him. Isn't it interesting to him? The girl has good eyesight. I don't know whether she covets her appearance or recognizes her excellent martial arts skills. Both. Alas, they have to live up to their infatuation again. Xing Dafeng walked around the original mountain temple on the top of the mountain, lay down next to the railing and looked at the mountains stretching to the north. His eyes were full of the color of indigo, which was especially lovely after the rain. I wonder if that girl from Sudian could learn the true martial arts when she saw the senior brother who had never met her face and learned boxing in the unfamiliar Qingming world. This is a well-deserved big shot. Even if he is said to be the #1 martial artist in the world and the entire human world, there is no objection. First, the last priest of the Sword Qi Great Wall, the Yan Kingdom. After that came Xia, the king of Lizhu Cave. Now he is the #1 martial artist in the world of Qingming Yashanlin Jiangxian. Xing Dafeng has stayed in Feishing City for several years and is very familiar with the customs there. In addition, he and Miss Nian Exen often flirted with each other, and their relationship became very good. He also knew all the stories about the Sword Qi Great Wall. Compared with the famous Summer Palace, the Cold Palace is a bit unsightly. It is similar to the vassal of the former. The two have the meaning of the Empress of the Palace and the concubine of the Cold Palace. The outside world will directly link the Summer Palace to the Yingguan. Whenever one of the titles is mentioned, the other one will naturally come to mind. However, in the hands of the two Yingguan, Shao Sun and Qin Pingon, they have indeed pushed the Summer Palace to a very high level. The location made the Qi practitioners from Manhuang and Haoren have deep memories of this place name. Nowadays, the Tibetan Han Palace in Feishing City has been transferred to the hands of the criminal officials Qi Shou and Yan Exin, who are responsible for the affairs, and has become the government office of the criminal swordsman and the martial arts performance ground of the warriors. But in fact, hiding Han Palace was the exclusive territory of the priest's lineage a long time ago. It's just that the Sword Qi Great Wall's files deliberately avoided talking about it. One to escape the heat and the other to escape the cold. To escape the cold? What are you hiding from? Why hide? Could it be that the two palaces of the Sword Qi Great Wall have their own origins with the fire god and water god of the fifth high school in the ancient heaven? Qin Pingon once asked the boss Zhenxian a series of questions, but the boss asked him to ask the priest, saying that the priest was in charge of this area, and he knew better that these old Huangli were too rough to wipe their butts. Qin Pingon had no choice but to ask the priest what his life experience was besides the name on the secret file, why the record was erased and where this person was currently. The boss sword Immortal said you can ask the previous Yingguan. I remember that the braided man seemed to get along well with the priest and they had a good relationship. Qin Pingon was so angry that he itched his teeth and said, You want me to ask Xiao Sun, who is already in the 14th realm, face to face? Should I run away after asking or should I die after asking? The boss Zhou Xian patted the new Guan on the shoulder and sighed. So, you can't just be taller than Xiao Sun. It doesn't work. When your realm is equal to hers, you can ask and you can run away after asking. If you want to chat a few more words, just chat a few more words. The barrier set up in Lizhu Cave was originally created by Cui Han. Qin Pingon already knew that the current manager was still Lin Jingqing. As for the previous manager, there was no record and he did nothing. It seemed that his senior brother Cui Chong was not satisfied with his actions, so he replaced him with Lin Jingqing, who worked in the kiln supervision and construction department. Is the foreigner whose pseudonym is Xiaxinan. This person is nominally a disciple of Old Man Yang, and his identity is equivalent to that of Li Er and Jing Dafeng later. As the last priest of the Sword Qi Great Wall, Xiaxinan quietly left his hometown. Hanging Mountain was the only way to go. Later he met Zhang Tiaoxia, who was the #1 martial artist in Howren in the past, on the sea. They had a fight and just exchange ideas. After that they landed in Tongyi's Hao and found Qing Tong from the demon suppressing tower. According to the inside story, Qing Tong leaked to Xiao Mo. The two sides broke up on bad terms. Then go to Aquarius continent and secretly enter Lizhu Cave. The disciples taught by Old Man Yang of the medicine shop are all martial artists without exception. From Xiaxinan to Li Er, Jing Dafeng, and finally to Su Dian and Shi Lingshan. Of course there must have been some senior brothers and sisters before Xiaxinan, but after all the lifespan of a pure martial artist is not as good as that of a Qi practitioner. Unless there are exceptions like Xiaxinan, I think they have all been wiped out. In the history of the Sword Qi Great Wall, the last martial artist at the end was Bai Lianshuang, the old nanny of the Ning Mansion. According to the archival records of the Yingguan lineage going back even further, it turns out that the last Jijia martial artist was hundreds of years old, and she was still a female master. Even if we keep turning the pages forward in the long history of the Sword Qi Great Wall, the number of martial arts masters who can reach the top of the mountain and reach the end is still pitifully small. The reason why it was so abnormal was naturally that the Sword Qi Great Wall had already planned to build embankments to intercept the flow, and accumulated great accumulation to allow someone to monopolize the military fortune. This person is the last priest whose surname is Yan Minghua. His real name is Yan Gua. Qin Pingon once saw an annotation in a secret file that was obviously written by Xiao Min. The physical body of every pure warrior is a pantheon of incense. Thousands of years ago, the first ancestor of the military strategist single-handedly pioneered martial arts and created a new world for the world. Unfortunately, he reached the top but failed to reach heaven and became a 15th-level monk like the founder of the three religions. It is said that precisely because he was blessed with martial arts, this path was different from Shinto. If it is too close, it becomes a burden that cannot be thrown away. Unless he dissipates all his luck, he will have a chance. It was just that the battle to reach the sky was about to come, so he threatened to talk about it later. The war was imminent and it would be good to have more killing power. As for what happened later, it was the internal strife that almost caused chaos in the world again. He was beheaded and imprisoned in the sky for thousands of years. Back then, Qin Pingon also asked the boss Zhou Xian a crucial question. Why Ning Yao was so seriously injured in the small town? Qin Qingda's answer at the time was rather perfunctory. He only said that someone had made a fortune telling that Ning Yati should suffer this disaster, and the sooner the better. Don't be afraid of bad things early, but they will be easy to deal with. Jing Dafeng straightened up and focused his gaze on a mountain. Not far from the north of Lulu Mountain, there is a medium-sized hilltop. There is no owner practicing Taoism there, so it is so deserted. I remember Weibo mentioned it once. It seemed that there had been some construction projects on that mountain before, but they were just careless and pretentious and then abandoned halfway. Further north is the Hon Kim Lake formed by the Longquan sword sect's relocation of all the peaks. The mountain and the water seemed a little lonely and they were silent for a long time. Jing Dafeng thought for a while. That lonely mountain top seems to be called Jinran Mountain. Love between men and women is actually similar to cultivating Taoism. If the mountain is not mine, I will be the mountain. It's probably wishful thinking and unrequited love. Even if you get closer, you can only look at the mountain from the foot of the mountain. Jing Dafeng went to the back mountain and then Qin Lingjun took Qingjia to the top of the mountain, planning to visit here first and then take her to Jisa Peak. Qingjia looked at the building on the top of the mountain and asked doubtfully, "Where is this place?" It turns out that there is no plaque hanging here, but there is a long couplet hanging here. It doesn't look like a fairy mansion but more like an ancestral temple? Why was it hung here earlier? Why not withdraw it now? Qin Lingjun explained with a smile. There used to be a mountain temple here and this is the old site. Later the mountain changed the place and moved to Chiduan Mountain. The road we took up the mountain just now was actually an incense-burning shrine. My master liked it very much. This couplet has been left and according to local customs, it can be called yuzu. Although it looks a bit strange and does not match, my husband believes in this and it is not just for show. Qingjia suddenly realized no wonder. She looked at the couplet a few more times and silently wrote down the content. The world whispers and the sky hears thunder. Although our ancestors are far away, we offer sacrifices to Yicheng. Don't worry about who I was in the last life. You need to pay attention to this life. My destiny is my own. It will be here for eternity. The dark room is dark and the eyes are like lightning. Although my descendants are stupid, they should read poems and books. I don't care who I am in the next life. Don't underestimate this body. Seek your own blessings. 3 talents are here and 6 feet away. Qin Lingjun didn't urge her to move. We in Luopa Mountain are full of knowledge. We are the ones who know and cherish blessings the most when we are surrounded by blessings. On the way to Lulu Mountain, no matter how hard Qingjia, who was in the immortal state, tried his best to see the mountain, he could only see the mountain from outside the mountain. The clouds covered the mountain and the fog surrounded it, making it difficult to see clearly. After passing the archway at the foot of the mountain and actually entering the mountain, I realized that there was indeed a different cave. In addition, Qingjia's spiritual consciousness was sharp, which was different from that of ordinary Daoist. He only mentioned the continuous heavy rain that refused to stop, and Qingjia could see more. There are many ways and she has obtained a piece of Tao Yun, but she has not been able to truly refine it so far. Qingjia knows that this matter is not trivial, but it is a pity that she is allowed to use her magical powers in various ways, and even specially chooses one on the spot. In a place with clean mountains and rivers, I tried to form a formation to receive rainwater, and wanted to harvest more through this, but I still couldn't get more gifts from heaven. Qingjia knew that this matter could not be obtained by external force, so she had to give up. Before setting off, she did not remove the landscape formation. Instead, she left a sum of fairy money and allowed it to continue to operate without stopping with some genius. The loss of earthly treasures is not worth mentioning, just leave it to those who are destined to go to the mountain to get this beautiful place. Qingjia came to this Luoluo mountain. Although she was a little disappointed at the foot of the mountain, when she climbed up the mountain she became more and more sure that the mountain was hiding a great formation which was very mysterious. Even if there was no one in the mountain, she would still be better than climbing if she wanted to sneak in. It's still difficult. Qingjia had already noticed at a glance that the kid in green clothes named Jingqing next to him had a water snake at his feet. Thanks to his ability to walk through water, he had the perfect appearance of Yuanying now. Qin Lingjun took her to the Jisa Peak Patriarch Hall. The two of them browsed and chatted. The scenery they saw along the way made her feel relaxed and happy. The sky was bright, the ground was warm and dense, the smoke and clouds filled the rock walls, and the pines and cypresses arched out of the landscape house. It was indeed a blessing. Miraculous, not artificially chiseled. In addition, there are many pavilions on the mountain roads for people to rest and enjoy the scenery. Every few miles there is a pavilion. They have wonderful names and are quite impressive. I think it was the handiwork of Qin Yingguan. It is only said that the Chan-Biding pavilion they are currently standing on has a wide view, just like the mountain gods helping each other, sweeping away the peaks and clouds for people, and they can see a mountain range in the distance. Following Qingjia's line of sight, Qin Lingjun introduced that it is called Chiduan Mountain, the place where my good friend Wei Shinjun became enlightened. For the wise people who have mastered the magical power of Shuqi, Piyun Mountain is very close. If Qingjia had not been hindered by his own background, he really wanted to go to Piyun Mountain, hide his identity, and participate in a famous event. Night Party. The path of incense and the divine way is indeed easier to achieve immortality than refining qi and cultivating the truth. Qingjia couldn't help but sigh quietly. On the way to a higher level as a qi practitioner, no matter how strong your heart is in asking questions, you will inevitably sigh a little, lamenting the hard-earned achievements of your current cultivation, and melancholy about the future path. Rugged and difficult to navigate. In the 13 realms under the Hadao, one mountain opens out a mountain barrier. The realms are passes and there are tens of thousands of mountains outside the mountains. Different from the ordinary wild monsters, Xianxia has been admiring and fascinated by Xianxia since he was a child. Of course, if Mr. Zheng hadn't come to Jinsui City, Xianxia would not have become a trader and left the wilderness to seek refuge in Baidi City. There is no limit to the sea of learning, but there is no limit to my life. Ability is limited, desires are endless. The skin-shaped body of a human being is a precious raft for cultivating Taoism and becoming an immortal. Otherwise, why would the monsters and spirits in the world work so hard to become human beings? This is the result of being disbanded on the spot, obediently returning one's Taoism to heaven and earth. In so many unknown caves, there are so many Qi practitioners with great perseverance, great opportunities and great luck, but now they are all dead bones. No matter how you say it, it is better than the best. Look at the world outside the mountains. How many people are young after thousands of years? The same poor people have been the same for hundreds of years. Isn't it even more sad? Qingjia's thoughts wandered thousands of miles. At the beginning of the melting of heaven and earth, the vitality is weakening. Reminiscing about the ancient style is so elusive. Hearing the sound of rustling footsteps in the distance, Qingjia immediately put away the scattered thoughts that were as numerous as weeds and calmed down. She didn't want to show the slightest bit of cultivation here, so she didn't use any technique similar to Buddhist clairvoyance. She just turned her head and looked around. There was a strange little the mountain road holding a bamboo stick and carrying a shoulder bag. Qingjia looked at it. Look again, you can never be sure of the true state of the person coming. Seeing that the Taoist fellow from Yuanhu showed no sign of moving for a while, Qin Lingjun simply sat cross-legged on the bench with his hands on his chin, happily taking a break from the busy work. When it comes to showing up to entertain male monks, there is nothing wrong with it and there is no shirking the responsibility. But for women, Qin Lingjun is not Jing Dafeng, let alone an old cook, so it is really not a big or small chore. I recall those days when I was there in Yujiang. Although I was full of friends and happy all day long, I didn't know the least about the worldly customs on the mountain. Welcomes and farewells were either grudges or business. Not to mention those old nascent soul immortals whose names are only heard but whose form is not seen. Even a golden elixir can be said to cover the sky with one hand. As the host, Brother Yujiang Water God, he is here. Before opening the mansion, it was because of some hidden encounters in the mountains in his early years and the twists and turns of the connection with the Shingao sect that he met a disciple of the Izhou Dao master, Qi Zhenjuan, who held the blessed land. To help him, Yujiang bestowed upon him a treasure that was similar to an imperial edict to open the palace, and this led to the later splendor of the Qingjian Water Palace, which was arrogant in shape and resembled a dragon palace on land. There was no reason to think of a female Qi practitioner in Qingjian Water Mansion. Her origin was unknown. Her appearance was not bad, but her color was not very beautiful. Although she was not a peerless beauty, she had the unique charm of a beautiful woman. Of course, Qin Lingjun didn't understand this back then. Are all private remarks made by friends. Some say that she is the forbidden concubine or concubine of the water Kansas. Others say that she is a poor person who came here to take refuge. The family is kind to Yuken and hides in Qingjian Water Mansion. Qin Lingjun only I know that she lived in seclusion all year round, lived frugally and was stingy to an excessive degree. When it came to her spiritual practice, she really had a determination to pursue the path even if she died in this life. This was probably what is called in the Book of Ghosts and Monsters, dying for the sake of pursuing the path. Unfortunately, her end was not good. I wasn't familiar with her, and I probably hadn't even talked to her for a few words, so Qin Lingjun didn't feel very sad about her ending. He just felt that something should not be like this, but the result was like this. That's it. Qin Lingjun was not sentimental. On the mountain, he would only show some emotions consistent with his appearance when he thought of his old friends on the other side of Yujiang. He murmured, "On the road to practice there are wind and rain and obstacles are like autumn grass. The achievements are like spring ice. The accumulation is not high. There are many difficulties here and the word hardship can describe them all." Qingjia was a little surprised when he heard this and sincerely praised, "Good advice, fellow Taoist." Qin Lingjun waved his hands repeatedly and said with a laugh, "I won't say that these are formalities. I heard them from Brother Dafeng. I just borrowed them." Qingjia was obviously doubtful. Qin Lingjun grinned and said, "He becomes a fool whenever he meets a good-looking woman, but he is actually a very smart person." Qingjia declined to comment. Before coming to Luopa Mountain to recognize his ancestors, Xianxia did some solid homework. Leaving aside the fact that the mountain master Chen Pingon is the hidden official, the Qi practitioners in Howren's world definitely don't know more inside information than she does in the wilderness. The most regrettable thing is that there are too few reports about the mountains and rivers of Luolu Mountain. When Xianxia arrived at the boundary of Aquarius continent, she wanted to get some paper content at the Mountain Ferry or the Xianxia Inn, but she never expected that she would never find it. Qi practitioners occasionally mentioned it and it was mostly gossip. Xianxia knew as soon as she heard it that it was nonsense and not illegal. After she inquired a little more, she found out the reason. It turned out that before the rise of Luoluo Mountain, it's just an inconspicuous little sect on a small mountain. At most, it is regarded as a vassal of Piyun Mountain, helping Lord Wei Shan of Dali to launder some shady money into clean silver for Beiyu's treasury, so it is not worthy of the mountain's official report. How to spend pen and ink? It is not appropriate for the Immortal Mansion to investigate deeply. After all, there are too many investigations. If something goes wrong, the person who is really being talked about has no intention of listening, and the person who has good intentions will find some conclusive evidence, and then be reported to a certain company in Pyeongchang. If the chief official goddess showed it to Mr. Wei Shan, wouldn't she be upset and talk about it in vain? In this way it would be like quarreling with a northern mountain. When the time comes, Piyun Mountain will bear the grudge and reciprocate the courtesy, directly sending an invitation letter to the night banquet to his door. To go or not to go? Not going would be a slap in the face to Mr. Wei Shan. If he goes, how should he prepare the congratulatory gifts? Who doesn't know that the roll call at the foot of Beiyue is unique? How many sects of the Immortal family came to the door with gifts to congratulate, but they suffered a lot here, just because they underestimated the lavishness of their peers, and had to temporarily increase the weight of the gifts. Those at the front of the team are not individuals, and like to embarrass themselves and make themselves fat. Don't you? If it makes me feel better, then I will pay for it out of my own pocket first, then report it to the sect later, and raise the predetermined gift to a higher standard so as not to make it easier for those who follow. When the young Yin official quietly returned to his hometown from the Jianqi Great Wall, and then he led the team to inquire about Jianjingyang Mountain, it happened to be at the stage when the Confucian Temple banned Howren's report. It was obvious that the Confucian Temple had been instructed to suppress the news. I don't want Luo Shan and Chen Pingon to be too famous, and there is a tacit understanding between the Chinese Confucian Temple and the Great Li Dynasty. No wonder it is difficult to find a tofu-sized piece of space in the Shanshui Di newspaper in Aquarius continent. Nowadays in Aquarius Island, it is recognized that there are 3 odd things and 2 weird things in Luoluo Mountain. The first one is in a sect's immortal mansion with very few genealogy monks, the second one is in a mountain sect with a lot of martial arts masters, and the third one is in a righteous sect with many mountain spirits. One of the strange things is that the latecomers of Luopa Mountain can actually allow Ruan Qiong, who was the first to determine the identity of the sect, to force the Longquan sword sect out of the old Li Zhudong world and have to move to the north. You need to know that Ruan Qiong is a member of the Great Li Dynasty. The chief minister never thought about making room for Luo Shan. As the sun is rising in Luolu Mountain, it is unstoppable as can be imagined. I think it's because when Qin Jianxian was young and down to earth in his hometown, what kind of relationship did he have with Ruan Qiong, who was the last saint of Lizhu Cave Heaven? Now that we meet again on the road or in the imperial palace of Lijing City, does sect master Ruan need to give way to Qin Jianxian? There is another strange thing, that is, the person who protects and worships the mountain in Luopa Mountain. Now the outside world only knows that his surname is Zhou. He has a great background and his realm is immeasurably high. It is only said that during her visit to Xingyang Mountain, she deliberately suppressed her realm to the extremely low level of Dongfu from beginning to end. She was the only monk who was so ignorant of the Xingyang Mountain sword immortal. Not to mention Xingyang Mountain, which has a sword master like a cloud, it is not worthy of her taking action at all, and it is not even worthy of her showing the slightest bit of Taoism. Despite her skinny appearance as a little girl in black, she must have a profound Taoist practice, rejuvenating her youth, and her cultivation is bottomless. Occasionally I have some objections, wondering if there is a possibility that the state enshrined in that week is actually the state that everyone sees. However, news soon came out that proved the absurdity of this statement and completely dispelled the doubts and disputes. These news were first transmitted from the main city of Jianqi Great Wall to the Mirage in the north in the early years, and then passed through the upside-down mountain to the cross-continental ferries of the old dragon city. They traveled all the way to Aquarius continent. The monks from Ezhou later realized that in this matter, Qin Jianxian became the last hidden official of the Great Sword Qi Wall. It turned out that Zhou Chongfeng was a well-known figure in the Great Sword Qi Wall and was often mentioned by the locals. The sword cultivator mentioned that he was respectfully called the Big Water Monster of Dumb Lake. Whereas the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the local sword cultivators there are so high-minded that they can't even look down on the entire world. How can they look down on a few outsiders? What's more, if the genus of spirits want to gain a foothold in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there is a reason. If I remember correctly, isn't there only the old deaf boy who is the #1 great swordsman? It was indeed a great opportunity. Before Qin Jianxian became successful at that young age, he was able to invite such a fierce general from Beiju Luzhou to sit on the top of the mountain and protect the mountains and rivers. Qingjia asked from the bottom of his heart, "Fellow Daoist Jingqing, could this be your Lulu Mountains Zhou Zongfang?" Qin Lingjun stretched out his hand to greet Xiao Mili and said with a heartfelt smile, "Yes, her name is Zhou Mili and she is patrolling the mountain. In our family she has the highest official rank. There is something about our mountain master's 2 senior brothers. Everyone has to listen to her. The official authority of our Zhou Dharma protector is very great." The speaker has no intention and the listener has intention. Qingjia was shocked. 2 senior brothers? There are only a few direct disciples of Wenxing and those senior brothers of the young Yingguan. You can pick 2 at random. Tuichan left and right. Lu Shilu Qi Jingchen. Qingjia had originally concluded that this water monster, contrary to the rumors spread by the outside world, was actually in the cave realm, which was absolutely true. Now she didn't dare to make any judgments. The little girl in black who was jumping up and down, first saw Jing Qing's waving hand, and then saw the strange woman in a simple and elegant dress. He quickly held his breath and concentrated, walked seriously and quickly came to the pavilion. At the same time he embraced the green bamboo staff and the golden pole and saluted, "I have met the Immortal Master. I am glad to meet you. Generally speaking, if you can go up the mountain you are not considered an outsider." Qingjia returned the courtesy and said, "Xing Qingjia of Jingqiqing, I have the honor to meet Zhou Chongfeng." The little girl in black nodded. She was not good at polite greetings with strangers, so she suddenly became cold-hearted. Qingjia was the first to speak with a smile. "In the past in the wild Jinsui city, I heard about Shanzhu Chen's wine shop and the name of Mute Lake Wine." The little girl was timid and asked tentatively, "Seriously?" Qingjia smiled and said, "There are absolutely no lies." The millet grains suddenly became excited. "The reputation spreads far and wide, huh? A household name, huh? The big water monster of Dumb Lake is not very tall but famous. It is famous all over the world and there is more than one. As for realm and all, it's all misunderstanding. Hey, small misunderstanding, hee hee." Qingjia was still speculating on the true Taoism of the little girl in front of him. Could it be that she was really the kind of Tao Dao Zhenren, who had returned to her original nature and had what the Taoist books call an innocent heart? She was originally on a mountain patrol, so she was happy to accompany Jing Qing and Yuanhu Immortal to take another trip to Jisa Peak. Qingjia looked at the little girl leading the way and shook his head. There were dragons and crouching tigers hidden in the poor mountain. It was not surprising, so he didn't want to guess the cultivation level of the mountain protector. Qin Lingjun suddenly pointed to the cliff carving on the roadside. "Fellow Yunhu Taoist, what do you think of these words?" Qingjia took a look at it, nodded in appreciation and said, "It is a first-class cursive calligraphy with extremely good skills. Like a strong man drawing a sword, his spirit is flying." Qin Lingjun had already prepared the draft and immediately added, "It was carved by Jing Dafeng. Even my mountain master said that he is not weak in academics and has the skills of a boy. Brother Gale, I can only help you so much. It is said that a woman can only hide her ugliness, but a poor man can only hide his ugliness." Qingjia had been holding a question in her heart for a long time, and she couldn't figure it out. She had asked Mr. Jing before, but Mr. Jing seemed to know the answer, but deliberately didn't tell her, and asked her to ask the master again when she got to Luolu Mountain. This doubt is why Qin Pingon chose Luo Mountain as the dojo and the basis for establishing the sect Luo. That's not a good way to say it. People at the bottom of the mountain pay attention to auspicious words, but people at the top of the mountain are more taboo. Regarding this matter, even the monks in the hometown of the wild world have a lot of speculations and quarrels, but there is no conclusion. Xianxia hesitated. I have a question, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask. She immediately laughed at herself, thinking that she had really met the young hermit official, and no matter how curious she was, she didn't dare to ask him face to face. Xiaomili scratched her face and frowned at Jingqing. Jingqing, you answer. Qin Lingjun has always been a big-hearted person, and he laughed and said, just ask, fellow Taoist, I will definitely tell you everything I know. Outside the mountains I might be a little more cautious, but in the mountains on my own territory with the support of the mountain owner, I am full of courage. Xianxia asked, this mountain has a poor name. Does it hide the knowledge of the university? As a result, Qin Lingjun was blinded as soon as he heard this. Taoist fellow Yuan who asked such a tricky question. He had never thought about such a close question. He coughed a few times, hinting to Xiaomili, you and the mountain master talk about everything. Do you have a ready answer? Xiaomili and Qin Lingjun had a tacit understanding. They immediately turned around and said with a smile, before coming to Luopa Mountain I asked the good mountain owner. He said that Luopa Mountain was an ancient name in the county chronicle of his hometown. He chose the top of the mountain, and personally I went into the mountain to inspect it and saw that it looked promising, so I spent money to buy it. The good mountain owner didn't think much about it at that time. In fact, Qin Pingon told her more, including some secrets that were not known to outsiders. Xiaomi was not good at pouring beans through a bamboo tube. He only said 3 sentences to everyone, so he couldn't give up everything. Xianxia nodded and stopped asking. After thinking about it, he couldn't help but ask again. Two fellow Taoists, this is a rare opportunity. I have another question. I don't want to say it out loud. As we all know, there are 3 souls and 7 souls in the human body. How are the sages recorded in ancient books that human essence is the life soul and the body is called soul? Taoists also say that the soul is the yang god and the soul is the yin god. However, since ancient times, the spiritual book Secrets of Refining Qi and Cultivating Immortals, as well as the practice of our monks, however, the golden core realm allows the yin god to travel far away from the body, while the nascent soul realm creates an outer body of the yang god. The former is virtual, like a soul traveling between heaven and earth, while the latter is real and more consistent with the body. In this way, is it different from the yang soul and the yin soul? Dare I ask these 2 fellow Taoists, how do you explain this truth? Is the ancient book wrong, or have we gone astray in our Taoism? The little girl leading the way walked faster. The boy in green didn't flutter his sleeves. He had to bring in reinforcements. He first called out to Brother Dafeng with his heart, saying that the opportunity has come. That fellow Yuanhu Taoist asked a good question. Please run over and help answer it. I can't help but look at you with admiration. Xing Dafeng ignored him. Qin Lingjun could only recite Wei Bo's godly name Yayo repeatedly in his heart. Wei Bo asked what was it. Qin Lingjun quickly explained the situation, and Wei Bo rewarded him with the word, go. Qin Lingjun had no choice but to continue shouting at Xing Dafeng from the bottom of his heart. If he didn't come to the rescue, the brothers would do whatever they wanted in the future. Xing Dafeng, who was busy giving boxing tips to the young girl Chao Yang on the back mountain, had no choice but to say goodbye. He rose up in the wind and landed on the mountain road in an instant. His figure was elegant, and when his feet touched the ground, the man trembled slightly. Sleeves smiling face to face with Xianxia. Putting aside his appearance and temperament, he does have the demeanor of a master. Xing Dafeng gathered their voices together and complained to Qin Lingjun. It's not like you don't understand. I'm used to living on my reputation, and mystical studies are not my specialty. Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes and said, stop talking nonsense and get down to business. Don't let outsiders think that we are uneducated. Xing Dafeng felt helpless and had to ask Xianxia to repeat the question. After listening to it, he breathed a sigh of relief and shocked me. It turned out to be a question asked by a young boy in a school. Damn it, I thought Sister Yuanhu was going to ask how to reach the sky in one step and soar in the daytime. However, Xing Dafeng had to deliberately pretend to be deep in thought, and then he answered with a smile. The Li Xing created the word, but he personally interpreted the word and defined it, but there were not many. If I remember correctly, one of them included the sentence the soul, the prosperity of ghosts. It is necessary to know the earliest ancient seal script with the word Hun. The word Hun means ghosts above the clouds and below, and the word Pu means ghosts on the left and white on the right. To explain why it seems to be contrary to the tenets of Taoism, the yin and yang are just interconnected with each other. Qi refiners, also known as Taoist priests in ancient times, do what they do, which is to swim against the current, steal yin and yang, seize creation, turn the heavens and the earth's axis, and use this to become a saint, become an immortal, and become an ancestor. Xianxia seemed to have some enlightenment after hearing the words. Zheng Dafeng smiled and said, "How about a few more digressions?" Xianxia said seriously, "I would like to hear the details and listen attentively." Zheng Dafeng walked side by side with her and said with a smile, 10,000 years ago in ancient times, the battle to reach the sky broke through the heaven, and the divine way collapsed. After that, the world was settled, and the three religions and hundreds of schools of thought, which were originally only in their rudiments, were with rapid development. Those immortals and talents with destiny and luck will be saved after hearing the Tao, and they will ascend to heaven and earth. They will open up and find the blessed land of heaven and earth. They will be free and at ease and want to be with heaven and earth. Secondly, they will have longevity and achieve the realm of real people on land. Stay in the human world. You can feel happy again for a moment. The soul is finally separated, and the boundaries between yin and yang are unclear. 7,000 years ago was the ancient times, and the remnants of a group of ancient gods survived, occupying part of the old thrones, each performing their own duties, and the priesthood had slightly less authority. It was just reduced, but the dragon was still responsible for making clouds and rain. City god temples began to appear in the world, as well as new gods canonized by the imperial court, which were orthodox, and numerous prostitution temples from all over the world, sharing the incense in the world, lest the old gods hide in them and take the opportunity to resurrect. Jane, in short, the purpose of consecrating the gods is to distract the mind. Year after year, bidding farewell to the old and welcoming the new, the establishment of the tradition of beating the spring drum every year in the Chinese Confucian temple is actually a declaration to the heaven and the earth, to the outside world. 5,000 years ago was the Middle Ages, and 3,000 years ago was marked by the Battle of Dragon Slaying. Today it is generally regarded as modern times by the Qi practitioners on the mountain. Now this reign, you and I are just in time, and it is estimated that it will happen again. A new turning point. As for how future generations will decide, we have to wait for another 1,000 years. In addition to the creation of characters and rituals thousands of years ago, the ritual sage has unparalleled knowledge of heaven and earth. About 8,000 years ago he also worked with experts to formulate more detailed rules. How many people in the world follow the ancient rituals established by the ritual sage to build temples? The temple worships the god, compiles family trees, and offers incense. The 3 souls and 7 souls of human beings are linked to life and death. When people are alive and live in the world of the sun, the soul is one and the body and soul are in harmony. After death, the soul ascends to heaven and the soul body falls to the earth, where the spirit resides. In the temple, the body is buried in its own place. The soul will be enshrined forever because it belongs to the ancestral temple, and will not wander around and become a lonely ghost. The soul will disappear with the decay of the corpse, and the bones, flesh, and form will return to the earth. It is destiny. When you are buried, you must cry 3 times and say a word to seal the coffin before the coffin is sealed. Therefore, in addition to the number of souls, they have different destinations, but they still have priorities. The soul ascends to heaven and the soul lives underground. Of course, the founders of the 3 religions are powerful, but I only admire the Li Sheng. Qin Lingjun was shocked when he heard this. He was indeed right about Brother Dafeng. There was something about him. Even if it's just nonsense, if you can compile so much at once without taking a breath, that's pretty smart, right? But when Qin Lingjun heard those last words, he quickly kicked Zheng Dafeng secretly. You speak more leisurely, don't be so insignificant. Qingjia stopped, turned sideways, bowed his head to the man and said solemnly, Thank you, Mr. Guo, for your teaching. It's like seeing the sun after clearing the clouds, and I suddenly became enlightened. Zheng Dafeng quickly dodged away and said with a smile, It's just a few casual remarks about Xiantian. I can't deserve this great gift from fellow Taoist Yunhu. Qingjia was full of energy, more colorful and more beautiful. It was really thrilling. Can you go to the husband's house later to disturb me? Zheng Dafeng shook his head, smiled and patted his belly. My academic ability is meager and I have no time left. If we continue to talk, we will show our timidity. Without further explanation, Zheng Dafeng had already left Yufeng. Qingjia still wanted to stay, so she reached out her arms, but hesitated for a moment and gave up. An expert outside the world is nothing more than this. but the man who traveled far and wide in a carefree way was still secretly chuckling. This skill of playing hard to get and his proficiency in it is really amazing. How could he tell that the sister was not firm enough in asking questions? Standing where she was, she just sighed and gave up. When Zheng Dafeng arrived at the gate of the mountain, he didn't care to talk to the Xianwei. He ran to the house to tidy up the bedding and shook the foot of the bed. It was very firm and would definitely not creak. The Xianwei was a little curious and walked to the house. Zheng Dafeng wiped his mouth and shouted with flying steps, "I'll help guard the door. Just rest." The Xianwei didn't know what was going on, but he was just happy to take some time off, so he went to his room. The plaque on the study room in the study room was written by Zheng Dafeng. The old cook helped make the plaque and it was called Zhou Xian. A large gold-lacquered ancient seal character. Style. It's real gold paint. In fact, Xianwei also has several alternative study names, such as reading the unseen study, or rereading the reviewed study. In life, if you want to be pleasant to the eyes and enjoy happiness, it is nothing more than reading new books and seeing old people again. But after thinking about it, Xianwei still felt that a person should not forget his roots. This Taoist slogan has been with him for many years. Hanging there, it is a reminder of the hardships he has suffered. Xianwei entered the study and took out the 2 serious books from his sleeves. Almost all the study items on the table were sent by Nuanshu. During the holidays he would add one more, so the little things added up. Sitting on a 4-year-old official's chair, he pulled out a Taoist book from a small mountain of books on his desk. The name was a bit long. It was Jade Purity, Gold and Green Flower Secret Text, Golden Treasure Internal Alchemy Secret. Xianwei has a habit of reading and likes to read prefaces and postscripts. After entering Luopa Mountain, all Taoist secrets that I had never dreamed of before were at my fingertips, but this habit has not changed. The reason is very simple. Except for the beginning and end, I can't understand the middle. Naturally, he recognized all the words, and when they were connected together, Xianwei was confused. He always felt that he couldn't understand it and it was of no use. Not to mention the relatively pragmatic Taoist book in hand which explained the process in detail. Xianwei read the Xian family's cultivation secrets that marked the passes and cultivation methods one by one, but he still didn't read them. He didn't have any trouble. Instead, he felt sleepy and wanted to take a nap. Xianwei is not angry about this. Xianwei has always known that he is not a real immortal seed. He does not have a Taoist root weapon. It is a fluke that he can practice magic by mistake and become a second-level Qi practitioner. The task of guarding the door is actually just a matter of nodding and taking a seat. When he has free time, Xianwei comes to the study to drink by himself, drink some old wine, have some food and drinks, read books and play chess and score. Even though Taoist Master Xianwei has to guard the door every day, he never fails to do his homework day and night every day. He doesn't dare to be lazy at all, worried about losing his job and wandering around in the world again. It's just that the Xianwei thought that he was limited by his talent and his progress was slow. He wasn't too impatient before because he knew that Luopa Mountain didn't care about the level of the realm, and it was okay to muddle along. Now he has accepted a disciple and he is still a serious disciple. In addition, Lin Feijing's current level is not low. According to Wei Shanjun, this son has a deep Taoist foundation and a strong immortal bone. He will be a disciple of him and will have great luck. The key point is that the disciple's realm is higher than that of the master. It's so shameful that we, Taoist Master Xianwei, are a little embarrassed. In fact, Wei Ba's statement is a pun. It seems to be a congratulation to Taoist Master Xianwei, but in fact it is to praise Lin Feijing's profound and extraordinary blessings. He was able to worship him as his teacher and became a Taoist priest in the name of Xianwei, the great disciple. But how did the Xianwei know the twists and turns here? And he finally felt a little more confident about the matter of cultivating Taoism, which was originally discouraged. The Taoist priest who had dreamed almost every day for as long as he could remember actually stopped dreaming for 9 days in a row. Xianwei didn't pay much attention to this. Living in seclusion in the mountains, shutting up the doors, burning incense late at night and keeping away the sleeping demons has brought you peace of mind, and supplemented by reading, it is the first good way for scholars of our generation to settle their souls. After reading the Taoist book for a while, yawning and needing to refresh myself, Xianwei changed to a book that could be read by following the folded pages and jumping around. Suddenly, it was like a divine help, killing millions of sleepyheads. Also reading, Weibo took a break in his own reading room in Beiyue. The The previous night banquet was very busy, so he had to slow down. In the past, I used to try my best to hold night banquets when I encountered unkind people. Whenever I had an excuse, I would hold one. Now that I have a divine title, it's time to come to an end. There is something that needs to be discussed with Qin Pingon at the moment. It turns out that the Dali Imperial Court is about to secretly send a group of Daoist embryos with immortal family roots and good talents who have practiced martial arts since childhood, a total of 16 people. Half of them belong to related households, and are the children of the top powerful families in Dali, or the good seedlings found and cultivated by these families. The other half are swordsmanship geniuses and martial arts wizards carefully selected by Great Li Nianganlang from various countries in the south of Aquarius continent. Moreover, it is said that in another year or two a second batch will be sent, and we will try our best to ensure that all of them are sword cultivators. After being disturbed by Qin Lingjun, Wei Bo put down the book at hand, walked out of the house with bare feet, stood under the eaves and stretched out his hand to twist the golden earring out of habit. Reminiscing about people looking into the mirror, seeing even more wonders when they are covered with clouds. Zhongyue Jinqing always spoke upright, saying that Wei Bo's Piyun Mountain was very popular, and the reason why it was able to surpass the 5 mountains was because of his face. Wei Bo didn't bother to refute, so he just accepted it as a smile. According to the previous schedule of Fijian's message, those boys and girls will take a military ferry to Nujiadu in 2 days. Qin Pingon has not been in the mountains recently. He may be busy or he may have his own plans anyway. There was no immediate reply to the Ministry of Punishment. The Dali court couldn't help but worry about whether they would be rejected. Don't send the person there, they would have to go back home that day. Even His Majesty the Emperor knew about this, so he asked the Ministry of Rights Yamen after sending a secret letter to Piyun Mountain. Wei Bo had to personally go to the Ministry of Justice office in the capital and asked with a smile, "Is there a third batch?" The other party choked for words. On one continent, on other mountains, no matter whether you are the Xin Gaozong or the Yunlin Jiang family with profound foundations, you are eager for someone to help send these young geniuses to your home. Only Luo Shan really had enough confidence to say that he didn't ask for this. What's more, the news that Qin Pingon is now the new national preceptor is completely unknown to the outside world, and the senior officials of Dali are aware of it. Luopa Mountain's announcement that it would be closed for 20 years was true, but Wei Bo didn't think Qin Pingon would reject these children. A large part of the reason, which is more interesting, is that Qin Pingon, who is the master and the head of the Shangzong, obviously feels the pressure brought by Qingping Sword Sect. It can't be that for 20 years while the lower sect is in full swing and prospering, Luopa Mountain is really closed and has been deserted. Qin Pingon even started to prepare for an important matter, arranging a detailed legal system for Luopa Mountain, and personally reviewing and compiling books, qi refining Dao books and martial arts secret books. So the only issue that needs to be considered is probably which hilltop to place those children. They will definitely not be placed in a down-and-out mountain like Chaoyin and Chaoyang. There is no doubt about this. Cui Dongshan and Pei Qian bought it not long ago. The nearby Tiaoyu Mountain and Fuyao foothills are very close to Luolu Mountain, and then there is the Huimeng Mountain belonging to Yunzi Dojo. All three are close neighbors of the main mountain, so they are relatively suitable. If qi practitioners and martial artists were deliberately separated, it would be more appropriate to settle in Tiaoyu Mountain and Fuyao Foot respectively. Wei Bo suddenly cursed a few words. Damn it, this is Luo Shan's housework, what should I worry about? Complaints are still complaints, things still have to be done. For example, Lu Yong from Qinghu Palace came all the way. Since Qin Pingon was not in the mountains, he had to take a trip to Luolu Mountain. Because Lu Yong was not an ordinary guest, Qin Pingon was very nostalgic, so Wei Bo put on his boots first, then stepped out and came to the door of a house and knocked on the door knocker. Lu Yong opened the door and saw Lord Wei Shen coming in person. He hurriedly saluted and congratulated him. Wei Bo already knew the purpose of Lu Yong's trip and did not beat around the bush. He said with a smile, "To be honest, Mr. Lu doesn't have to go through this trip in person at all. With you guys, the relationship between the two families is not just a casual acquaintance. It is just a good relationship between the two families at the foot of the mountain. In terms of love, Master Lu must come to Luopa Mountain. He really didn't move around much in the past, and it was Master Qin who bothered the Qinghu Palace. He has to come here to let Luopa Mountain show his loyalty as a landlord." As for Zhao Zhu's appointment as the guest minister of Luo Shan Ku, He has a chair in the Jisa Peak Ancestral Master's Hall. Master Lu, just take it easy. It's a done deal. Lu Yong had mixed feelings when he heard this. On the one hand, Wei Shenjun never imagined that Wei Shenjun, who had never interacted with him before, would be willing to value himself in Qinghu Palace so much. What was even more unexpected was that Wei Shenjun was an outsider in Luopa Mountain after all, or rather a half-outsider, and he dared to guarantee it like this. Master Qin Shan must have often mentioned Qinghu Palace to Wei Shenjun. Wei Bo smiled and asked, "Did Qin Lingjun mention that this house was specially reserved by Master Qin for Master Lu?" Qin Lingjun didn't say anything, but the old master stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Jingqing has already said it. It's really disrespectful and I deserve it." Wei Bo pointed to the couplet and said with a smile, "It was written by Qin Pingon himself. It's the only copy." The old man looked over there and was stunned for a moment. He was silent for a long time and murmured, "I can't afford it and I deserve it even more. Be generous and righteous, don't stick to trivial matters and gold and silver will come back again. Make friends widely, treat each other honestly, and your character will become more prosperous over time." Wei Bo smiled and said, "I'm going back to Piyun Mountain first. Master Lu is welcome to visit me at any time." Lu Yong then remembered something and took out a congratulatory gift that he had already prepared from his sleeve. "It is a great gift for a real person to walk on the ground." Wei Bo stretched out his hand and gently pressed the old man's arm, smiled and shook his head. "Any more is just hypocritical. Why do you only regard Qin Pingon as a friend and not me?" Lu Yong was speechless for a moment, just cupping his fists. Qingjia was about to arrive at a cliffside pavilion on the side of the Jisa Peak Patriarch Hall. Qingjia, who didn't need to rest at all, took the initiative to ask to stay here. The sun and moon are two fireflies and the universe is a magpie's nest. What a beautiful pavilion. Xianwei put down his book, rubbed his eyes and turned to look at the plaque in the study room. "I have read 30,000 scrolls of Taoism, do you know it? After 6,000 years of fame and glory, I am content with my content and my insufficiency." The Xianwei was worried and once asked the mountain owner, "The content of the couplet presented by the mountain owner is so powerful. I am afraid that the poor Taoist is of low level and cannot hold it down. Is it really appropriate?" At that time Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing. The Xianwei refused to accept it, saying that it would be more appropriate to place it in the mountain master's study. Qin Pingon said that it would be more appropriate to put it on your side, and then gave him a Taoist ceremony. The Xianwei was immediately at a loss. After thinking about it, he returned the salute of a scholar. After Qin Pingon left the study, he stepped out of the house gate and went up the mountain with his hands in his sleeves. "What kind of Tao do you want to learn? What kind of practice do you need? What kind of teacher do you need to learn? And what kind of skills do you need to learn? You are the first preacher in the world." Qin Pingon is already considered a courageous person. In the Dali Jingqing Inn, he only dared to bravely dare to take you back to the mountains to learn Taoism and practice together. One day when you think back to your past, you will remember it and go to the mountains to practice Taoism. There are countless green mountains in the world. If anyone dares not to come, just come to you. Sword of Coming Chapter 12:19. Chapter 12:19 Imagination. Qin Pingon changed into a robe. The sky and the earth are covered with snow and the robes are bright red. The tall trees in the snow are extremely red. High above the city, for some unknown reason, Zhou's figure shrunk to the size of an ordinary person. It wasn't until this moment that Ma Kuxuan knew that he had finally met the rightful owner. He was quite surprised. When did Qin Pingon enter the ancestral hall? He had been sitting at the door before and he didn't notice it at all? Ma Kuxuan believed that he had not underestimated Qin Pingon's moral character, and he did not hesitate to take risks, go against his wishes and use the thunder magic power that he had hated earlier. But in the end, Qin Pingon just used a clone to deal with him? I originally thought that if he moved out of this meticulously planned move, even if Qin Pingon survived, he would have suffered a loss in his Taoism, and the immortal who had just become an immortal would fall back to Yupu. Ma Kuxuan asked from the bottom of his heart, what happened to the release of Qin Pingon's inner demon? So what if he saw through it? Just strike while the iron is hot. This guy has been fighting for a long time and has a lot of tricks. But if you don't know the way, he will be killed. He fooled it. This is the reason why Ma Kuxuan didn't mind when he was in the big formation before. You Qin Pingon took the lead, but you didn't know that the mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole is behind you. It's not that simple to seize the lead. Logically speaking, the inner demons of a Taoist cultivator are at their peak when they are at the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm and when they are in retreat and want to advance to the upper 5 realms. This is because this is the only way for ancient Taoist priests. If you do not overcome the inner demons and overcome this obstacle, you will not be considered an earthly immortal. As long as he uses Zhou Mi's hand and some long-lost ancient magical power to open the cage of the heart and release Qin Pingan's inner demons, then this formation that isolates the world and helps Qin Pingan gain geographical advantages will become his key to facing the inner demons. The biggest difficulty is that the more spotless the world is here, the more innocent the inner demon's Taoist temple is. The inner demon Qin Pingan faces will be more like Qin Pingan himself. By then the Taoist will be 1 foot taller and the devil will be taller. When the time comes, Qin Pingan will have to face, in addition to Ma Kuxuan, the fake Zhou who was imagined, plus the inner demon Qin Pingan, they will be 3 immortals. Zhou Mi replied with a smile. It's not that I can't let go, but it's unnecessary. Qin Pingan's inner demon is very weird. For us, it has no killing power and is meaningless. I can't waste my Tao Xing and finally let go of my inner demon. The devil from beginning to end was just watching the show. Ma Kuxuan couldn't help but cursed. I just said this guy is a monster. Zhou Mi said, my existence makes him afraid. Can be seen that my true body makes his memory more profound than ordinary people. Ma Kuxuan said casually, how many people are worthy of Cui Chan and Qi Jingchun joining forces to fight against the enemy? And then they invited the founders of the 3 religions to join forces to suppress them? For thousands of years there was only one person. Ma Kuxuan waved his hand, and the remnants of the 5 thunders of heavenly tribulation scattered across the heaven and earth would, upon receiving the order, gather at the top of the city, pull up colorful silk threads and chop up countless snowflakes. Qin Pingan did not stop him and allowed Ma Kuxuan to pick it up. Zhou Mi shook his head. Anyway, the road is broken. There's no need to take it back. Wait until you win. Be careful. If you are contaminated by the sword's intention, you will lead the wolf into the house. Ma Kuxuan only listened to half of it. He still did not withdraw the decree, but gave up the idea of taking it back into his sleeves. Tens of thousands of colorful threads gathered around Ma Kuxuan's body, condensing into a knot-sized ball. The precious light circulated and shone like a lightning fishing net that covered the sky and the earth. Ma Kuxuan was the person who made the outline. Ordinary people do not know the difference between immortal magic and supernatural powers, and they all regard them as mountain methods. This is because they do not know the difference between gods and immortals. Tracing back to the origin, we can only talk about the roots of the Tao. Strictly speaking, the thousands of spells and tricks of the immortal family are all the lines created by the ancient Qi refiners in their own pursuit of the Tao. In the end, they are always inseparable from collecting Qi, refining Qi, and then using the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Purpose and then manifest it. Miraculous powers are derived from the many powers of ancient gods. Ancient Taoist priests may have carved purple books and recorded those paths in books. This is the origin of some Taoist secrets in later generations. What's more, many magical powers are gathered in the world. The traces of the brand are directly moved and engraved on the Buddhist bones, the door of the natal Qi palace and the wall, just like a book carved on a cliff or an inscription on the wall. Such ancient immortals and Taoist warriors are reincarnated and born in the future. They inherited part of their predecessors' legacy, which became the foundation for their enlightenment and the opportunity to enter the mountains. This is the reason why later generations pay attention to whether a person has immortal roots and whether he is a Taoist weapon when it comes to mountain climbing and cultivating Taoism to become an immortal. There are also ancient Taoist priests with extraordinary talents who can use it directly. As their Taoism deepens, they can improve it and change its appearance slightly so that they can better adapt to the new world. If we talk about how to display it, we only talk about one kind of magical power, and the will is wonderful in the word Tong, magical power connecting to the gods, a divine way running through heaven and earth. This is also the reason why later Taoists built altars, which imitated the magical power. Taoist priests, you can borrow dharma from the ancestors by granting urns and writing names in immortal books. This method requires paving a road. To take this road, you need to pass the customs ultimatum, hold the token and carry the treasure urn so that it can be smooth. No problem, this is the meaning of Taoist teaching. There is also the branch of incarnation that spreads out from the body, the golden body and the therm-like flow that controls the sky and the earth. They are all taken from the sky by the Qi practitioners and used on the earth. So this is why Zhou said that the road is broken. With Ma Kuxuan now in the immortal realm, he cannot build a second bridge in a short time. What's more, when Ma Kuxuan and Lei Bu borrowed this heavenly tribulation thunderpond, they were already suspected of being a thief. It was already an act of transgression, and they would definitely be held accountable later. Now that they have created such a mess, it is because Ma Kuxuan regarded Qin Pingan as this is the price that must be paid for being an imaginary enemy in the immortal realm. Fortunately, he has always been the kind of person who does things based on his mood and preference, ignoring his body and mind. Ma Kuxuan asked in his heart, "How is the progress of dismantling the formation?" Zhou said calmly, "It's very slow, far lower than expected. His flying sword rank is not low. Moreover, we must avoid alerting the enemy." Ma Kuxuan said helplessly, "I have been repeatedly taught by this guy to fight. It's best not to make any noise. Of course you don't care. No matter how thick-skinned I am, I can't get enough." Zhou turned a deaf ear, holding one hand behind his back and making a fist across his abdomen with the other. He held 2 chess pieces in his palms and rubbed them gently, making a creaking sound. He was not staring at Qin Pingan but staring at that piece of skin which has now transformed into a piece of immortality. It is destined to be a robe that has never been seen before or since. An immortal weapon that carries the true name of the demon clan is indeed very interesting. Even if Qin Pingan gave it to an Ascension Realm monk, he would not dare to wear it. Zhou seemed to be explaining to Ma Kuxuan the origin of Qin Pingan's true form. There are only 2 possibilities for this kind of instant formation to be able to hide from you. One, he is killing the culprit, destroying Tuyue Mountain and the city. Carving words on his head. After returning to Hauran, he actually did not return Lu Chen's cultivation level. He always stayed in the 14th pseudo realm and the higher realm. What he borrowed was Lu Chen's miscellaneous Daoist techniques. He borrowed them and used them. He naturally picked them up at his fingertips, and he didn't know the ghost. I don't realize it. Second, Fijian's natal magical power can not only isolate the world, but also start anew and recreate the world as he pleases. Xianxia, is there anything wrong? Qin Pingan smiled and stretched out an arm, spreading his palm indicating to continue. For a Taoist cultivator, it is not a pleasant feeling to be beheaded with 3 flowers on your head and have your merits forcibly dispersed by external force. Qin Pingan was forced to kill each other with one hand in order to get out of trouble. He really needed to rest his mind for a while. Fortunately, the beheaded things do not flow to outsiders. They are still scattered in this caged bird anyway, and they can be taken back sooner or later. You must give a level assessment, which is roughly equivalent to receiving half a punch from an 11th level warrior. Ma Kuxuan wanted to help Na Zhou delay time so that he could break the barrier between heaven and earth. Qin Pingan also needed to change a breath of pure qi, and secretly change some layouts temporarily to get what they needed. In this fight where no one knows the details of the other side at the moment, both sides cannot make a wrong move. Everyone wants to get rid of the other. Ma Kuxuan doesn't want to follow a magical path, and Qin Pingan certainly doesn't accept the situation. But both sides have an intuition that at a certain moment, just one move can determine life or death. Or it's Ma Kuxuan's magical power or Qin Pingan's fist or sword. Zhou said, in this way he has at least 2 natal flying swords which unite the world, build a framework, set boundaries and invite you to enter the urn. Whether the host invites you to drink a fine wine or a toast depends on your mood. All things together rely on a golden spirit. The long river of time created by copper coins was allowed to be freely arranged on both sides of the bank. The 2 flying swords and 2 magical powers were matched perfectly. It was equivalent to the saints of the 3 religions carrying around a dojo that could not be moved. Comparing the 2, those who are slightly inferior cannot advance to a higher realm. The advantage is that it has existed in this realm throughout the past and present from all directions. Ma Kuxuan felt troubled and frowned. Can't it just be a flying sword with several magical powers? Zhou smiled knowingly and said, have you forgotten the 10 young people in the world that Zhou raided? Aren't you surprised that only the Xianxia Yeshio and the swordsman Lu Kai who came out of nowhere were deliberately exposed by Zhou? Tell the story of Fijian's name, roots and even the 2 sword-raising gourds owned by Lu Kai? It was clearly Zhou's intention. It was like a letter telling the world. There was no need to hand the letter into someone's hands. Lu Guan is still the only genius to be on the list with the Golden Core realm. On the other hand, the last hidden official Qin Shi who was at the bottom, only relied on being a nascent Soul Realm sword cultivator and a Yufeng Realm martial artist at the same time. If I'm not wrong, when Yang's flying sword Bai Luo in Yang Sword Gourd's heart suddenly hit Cheong Bai Luo with one sword strike. It must have been Qin Jiangxian's sword that he was deliberately targeting. Zhou Mi raised his hand and rolled up his sleeves. This is a vast world. As long as the sky is high and the yin and yang are in harmony, the avenue will circulate in an orderly manner. Sword cultivators can break through 10,000 methods with one sword, and Lu Guan can break through 10,000 with one sword. The sword, the upper part is poor and the lower part is yellow spring, and the cage and barrier are all empty. Taozu had another sword-raising gourd called Immediate, and Lu Kai used it to refine the sword White Horse, which happened to defeat the long river of time between heaven and earth. In short, two swords restrained two swords, which happened to be extremely difficult. Qin Ping appeased him with a smile and said, "It's amazing. Although it's a fake, it's still far from the next level of authenticity, so it's not too clumsy." Ma Kuxuan said, "Don't forget that you are the one at the bottom and you can still be so happy." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I am at the bottom of the top 10 young people in the world, so you are the top 10 young people in Aquarius continent. Are you happy?" Ma Kuxuan twitched the corner of his mouth. Qin Pingon said, "Did Zhou Zi say hello to you in private when he was making the list? You thought you would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix, so you gave me the bottom position?" Ma Kuxuan stretched out his hand and rubbed his cheek, grinned and said, "There are times when you cry." Qin Pingon said with a smile, "Ma Kuxuan, you have a bad habit that you brought from your mother's womb, that is, you don't like other people's kindness and you want to overpower others in everything. Furthermore, you only do things that you think you can do well. Zhou Xian, this is not good, you have to change. Of course, the premise is that you still have a chance to change your ways." Ma Kuxuan was so disgusted by the words Kuxuan. Zhou Mi took a look at the bright red color in the snow. Ma Kuxuan sneered and said, "The old scholar's archenemy once said that being a teacher is a serious problem for people. I heard that you are not good at reasoning, so why don't you just go to the countryside and become a teacher?" Qin Pingon said, "I think people have two major problems. In addition to being a teacher taught by saints, there is another problem, which is being ashamed to be a disciple." Ma Kuxuan choked on his words. Qin Pingon took a deep breath. "Doesn't it seem impossible to choose to accomplish all the results in one battle?" Zhou Mi ignored the bickering between the two fellow villagers and said to himself, "Everyone in the world mistakenly thinks that the emergence of Lu Kai from an unknown swordsman to one of the top 10 young people in the world is a coincidence. Born, he followed the trend and gained the favor of heaven and earth. He felt that heaven did not want Ning Yao to be more beautiful than him. Just like among the younger generation, Chao Ci first followed Qin Jianxian on the martial arts path. Seems that the same should be true for swordsmanship. Only then would Lu Kai be compared with Ning Yao. He thought that Lu Kai, who had been practicing swordsmanship for 100 years, would have a chance to compete with Ning Yao at the same level of swordsmanship. Neither of them expected that Lu Kai, a swordsman, would truly the one we have to deal with is not Ning Yao but Qin Jianxian. Ma Kuxuan's mind was unusual. Instead of rejoicing in his misfortune, he regretted why he didn't have such an old enemy. Of course, Qin Pingon can be considered an old enemy, but swordsman Lu Kai is the key winner and loser tailor-made by Zhou Zi for Qin Pingon, which has a different meaning. However, this misjudgment that Lu Kai had the opportunity to compete with Ning Yao in Kendo was indeed reasonable at the time, because many people felt that Feishing City had moved to the colorful world and that it was no longer his luck in Kendo. With the strong old sword energy of the Great Wall, it stands to reason that Ning Yao's breakthrough speed may indeed slow down. Every time she advances to a realm, the stagnation period in the next realm will be longer. Then Lu Kai, who holds 2 Daozu sword gourds, has the possibility of catching up. What are the facts? What else could be done? Naturally, it was an afterthought and I misunderstood Ning Yao. It turned out that it made no difference whether she was refining swords at the Great Sword Chi Wall or not. In the previous 10,000 years, the sword cultivators in the world were nothing more than Qin Qingdu and other sword cultivators besides Qin Qingdu. These were the only two types. Now Ning Yao has shown signs and momentum of filling Qin Qingdu's vacancy. She just doesn't know if this heavenly barrier from the Ascension realm to the 14th realm of Hadao will stop her. Ma Kuxuan suddenly noticed that Qin Pingon had a strange expression on his face. "Why, while we were chatting in a hurry, we talked about your Taoist lover Ning Yao, and then we thought that I was a freeloader. Starting to feel uncomfortable? Nowadays, almost everyone in the world knows the record of the mountain-moving ancestor from Xingyang Mountain. It is amazing and jaw-dropping. He has done a series of feats that can be regarded as shocking in retrospect. Once in Lizhu Cave he was seriously injured first. Lu Xianyang and then forced Qin Pingon and Ning Yao to join forces to fight against the enemy. The two sides dealt with each other for a long time, fist-fighting with Song Chongjing, and finally seemed to have provoked Qi Jingchun, just because he wanted to move the Beiwepiyun mountain that now belongs to the knight Tershinjun. Little did they know that Ma Kuxuan had provoked them alone back then. At that time Ma Kuxuan's thoughts were still very different. Instead he felt that the foreign girl was incompatible with Mu Bottle Lane. If they, with different identities, could come together, the thunder from the sky would stir up the fire on the earth, and they would roll over the sheets or something like that. Very good, a flower inserted in cow dung, more interesting. Qin Pingon shook his head and said with a smile, "A dummy is just a dummy. It's not a real person after all. You can only follow the pictures and not make any whims." Zhou Mi said, "Oh? I begged Qin Jianxian to give me some advice." Qin Pingon said, "Let me first introduce the earliest names of my two natal flying swords, which are the caged bird and the moon in the well. I will correct you again, Lu Kai's flying sword Baiju was originally used to target the caged bird. Feijian Biluo is aimed at Jing Zhongyue. Of course there is no problem with your current judgment. I took bags of gold and copper coins and melted them into a long river of time. I was delusional and overestimated my capabilities, trying to make a bird in the cage. The creation of a small world is also due to the appearance of Lu Kai, and his two flying swords gave me a lot of inspiration." The implication is that Qin Pingon, knowing that Lu Kai was waiting for him on the road ahead, instead of taking a detour, went one step further. "Didn't your white horse ignore the constraints of the long river of time? Then I will do everything possible to collect gold and copper coins everywhere and keep throwing money away. Your Biluo is said to break 10,000 swords with one sword? Then let's see how many 10,000 swords you can break, 10 or 100. Zhou Mi suddenly realized, "Don't be afraid of death if you follow the path, just walk on the straight path. Turns out that this is sword cultivation." Ma Kuxuan clicked his tongue and said, "The head is really hard." Zhou Mi showed an expression of admiration and said with a smile, "It is a good habit to believe in fate but not to accept it." Ma Kuxuan asked in his heart, "What should I say?" Zhou Mi replied, "It's a bit troublesome. It's not easy to peel off the cocoon. I'm afraid there is a cocoon outside the cocoon. I can roughly infer that this place is one of the fantasy worlds. There are dozens of candidates. I have found the right one so far. There are 32 of them. Although their strength is definitely average and not as good as the sword Qi Great Wall, it is not difficult for him to use it to get in the way at critical moments and defeat your plans." Ma Kuxuan nodded. "This guy has been thoughtful since he was a child. He is good at pretending and is very cunning." In terms of city government, Song Jixian was not worthy of carrying shoes for this neighbor back then. As expected of a fellow man, I was pretending to be a fool and he was pretending to be a fool. Good people, we all succeeded back then. Qin Pingon seemed to have guessed their intentions, and with a slightly sarcastic tone he smiled and said, "It's useless to give you a chance." Zhou Mi suddenly said from his heart, "Be careful." Ma Kuxuan sneered and said, "Why are you so petty? If you continue to crack the barrier, it would be best if you can completely break it all at once. Doesn't matter if you don't succeed. I'm not used to him anymore anyway." In an instant the sky and the earth changed. The sky was blue and the beauty was lovely. There was not a single snowflake at all. The earth that was originally covered with thick snow suddenly became white without any trace of snow. At the same time, above the city head, a line passed across without any sword light visible. The height of the horizontal line was exactly at the waist of Ma Kuxuan and Zhou Mi, as if there was an invisible sword fairy, swinging out a sword and cutting across the world. Zhou Mi looked calm, just standing there, letting his body be cut in two by the waist. The upper half of the body was slightly smaller, and there was no scene of flesh and blood splattering. The body was not an illusion. The sword light cut was indeed a real thing, just chopped open. From the gaps in the two waists, bursts of dazzling colored glaze flowed out and overflowed. The two rays of light rose and fell, seemingly trying to connect together on their own to reassemble the body, but were blocked by the remaining sword intent. The road. This body is like an empty shell of a straw bag, but the straw bag under the skin is truly priceless. It is actually the glazed body refined from a large amount of gold essence and copper coins. As if receiving some kind of instruction from Ma Kuxuan, Zhou Mi stretched out his hand to hold the pocket-sized thunder pond, the size of a date stone. Another sword light hit the city head, splitting Zhou Xian's head in half. Originally it was just divided into upper and lower parts. The 2 parts of the body became 4 parts. In fact, these 2 sword rays cannot be said to be one or the same, and a complete huge section the sword rays span the entire small world. The sword light bloomed very fast and it passed by in a flash continuously and cut again and again, cutting the dense shape into pieces. The crisscrossing sword light was left in place, causing the city head to become fragmented, but only remained intact. A rough overview is horrific. Ma Kexuan's figure disappeared. Qin Pingan suddenly turned around and held out a sword. An existence like a speck of dust in the sky instantly transformed into a towering dharma form that was thousands of feet tall, and stepped hard towards the slightly insignificant Qin Pingan on the ground. Ma Kexuan, the incarnation of Ma Kexuan, who is covered in colorful treasure armor and has a majestic appearance, was cut open from the soles of his feet to his shoulders by the light of the sword that was lifted up, like tofu, without any hesitation. The sword light not only broke through the Dharma image, but the sword energy also spread out to both sides, as if a pair of giant hands were forcefully pushing the Dharma image body of Ma Kexuan to both sides. Qin Pingan frowned slightly. It would be normal for an ordinary monk in the same realm to be cut off by a sword in his own world. But Ma Kexuan is not an ordinary immortal, and his golden body should not be so fragile. At this moment Qin Pingan's heartstrings were tense, and his thoughts were changing rapidly. He finally chose a compromise method, avoided fighting, gathered up his whereabouts and hid. It turned out that when he saw Zhou Xian on top of the city, he instantly returned to normal. The whole person became extremely real and his aura completely changed. He was so stupid that he was even more real than Zhou Xian. At that moment Qin Pingan thought that Ma Kexuan had actually colluded with Zhou Xian, and as a backup man who stayed in the world, he was only waiting for today to kill him and take away half of one by force. Zhou Xian had a smile on his face and an extremely carefree expression. He raised his arms casually, put his fingers together and made a stroke, pointing directly at where Qin Pingan was standing. As soon as Qin Pingan stepped forward, an extremely deep ravine appeared on the ground outside the city and spread out. The whole bird in the cage was close to heaven and earth. It was really just a close call, but it was broken. The deepest part of the ravine and the farthest point were about to touch the boundary of heaven and earth. Qin Pingan, who had disappeared, was shocked and frowned. Is it really thorough? Otherwise, a mountaintop monk who is not in the Ascension realm would not be able to create this situation. When he heard Ma Kexuan say the word "come out," like a Taoist saint who followed his words, Qin Pingan was dragged out of a secret realm and forced to act. The sea of clouds was rolling and a golden palm created a hole. With lightning speed, it reached towards Qin Pingan, who was hanging in the air and had no time to avoid. The sword was handed out, and it penetrated the golden palm as big as a mountain. It was still smashed down with a huge momentum, and Qin Pingan had no choice but to punch it. The ground trembled and dust flew. Qin Pingan, who was knocked down, knelt on one knee in the center of the pit and vomited a mouthful of blood. Ma Kexuan said that he didn't learn boxing, so why was this palm, which he couldn't tell whether it was a technique or a supernatural power, not less powerful than Chao's boxing technique? There is no need to turn around. Qin Pingan's backhand is just a sword. However, Zhou Xian, who followed him like a shadow, easily grasped the tip of the night sword with 2 fingers. Zhou Xian raised his hand, and the sword energy condensed into a long sword. He returned the sword and slashed towards Qin Pingan's shoulder. Qin Pingan's body transformed into dozens of sword lights, and suddenly recondensed into his true body more than 100 miles away. The next moment, on the ground, Ma Kexuan, who seemed to be predicting the future, opened a fist frame and punched himself. The mighty fist is incomparable. Between this punch and Qin Pingan, hundreds of mirrors suddenly shattered and sputtered in all directions, creating a gorgeous scene. This is the advantage of taking advantage of the right time and place. Even if there is a temporary corridor of mirrors to block this punch, Qin Pingan still needs to shrink and move sideways to avoid the punch. It's very strange. When he made a careful seal and recited the word "withdraw," the previous ravine on the ground disappeared instantly, as if time went back and returned to the original state. Ma Kexuan raised his fingers towards Qin Pingan. Just as Qin Pingan was about to speak, Zhou Xian walked forward slowly and said with a smile, "The swordsmanship of the carver on the city wall, Xianxia, is disappointing." Qin Pingan said, "You don't even dare to say my name." Are you afraid that I will find your hiding place, or are you worried that your real body will detect any clues and shatter your glazed golden body with just one thought? Zhou said, I don't dare to call you by your first name, so Qin Jianxian dares to call Zhou by his first name? Qin Pingon smiled casually and said, I am a waste. I don't want to stop you from becoming more waste. Zhou said, I read 2 stories in a book. The protagonists in the stories survived not because they were the protagonists, but because they survived and were the protagonists. The background of a story begins in a place called Mu Ping Lane in Huaihuang County. The protagonist's surname is Qin. The other story ahead begins with a scholarly family in the divine continent of Middle-earth, turns to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, takes up most of the story in the wild world and ends with Howren. The ending is temporarily undecided. Qin Pingon suddenly said, I understand a good method. Sort of coming Chapter 1220. Chapter 1220 Brilliant. Regardless of whether Qin Pingon really knew or pretended to know, Ma Kuxuan was indeed deceived. Taking advantage of the moment when Ma Kuxuan's mind was slightly stagnant and he was stunned for a moment, Qin Pingon felt like he had been amnesty. The caged bird escaped and quickly moved back. Taking a step back, ripples formed in waves, and a portal opened out of thin air behind him. Qin Pingan's figure sank into a secret realm of mountains and rivers that was compared to a cocoon, and left the illusory world of the Sword Qi Great Wall. The dazzling bright red color suddenly disappeared from his field of vision. Ma Kuxuan couldn't see clearly, but he didn't look anxious at all. However, Zhou saw the way at a glance and explained, the method of moving mountains is to make the mountains move. Come to my magical power. His move was just a deliberate cover-up. In short, on his own territory he can switch to the secret location at any time, which is more straightforward and more precise than shrinking thousands of miles of earth into a small space. Hidden. In ordinary battles with the same situation, you will be in an invincible position. Ma Kuxuan said, time is limited, stop talking nonsense and lead me to catch up. Zhou nodded with a smile and patted himself on the head, and 3 flowers gathered at the top, transforming into a golden crown that seemed to be made up of Baiyujing, Xianxia, Tuyue Mountain and other places. Xian converged his figure to the size of a mustard seed, turned into a rainbow light, and swept into the Daoist crown, like an ancient sitting in the center of the heaven. Zhou took a closer look and followed the clues left by Qin Pingan's Dao Qi. He strode forward and opened a door with both hands. He ducked in and came to a bustling market with small bridges and flowing water. There was a sauce garden nearby. As long as the ordinary people on the street are close to Zhou, they will melt away and turn into nothingness. Zhou waved his sleeves and a majestic air swept out. The upper half of all the pedestrians, buildings and hills in this world were cut off. Zhou stamped his feet again and the lower half of the human world was like a fish turning over. The back was collapsed and dented everywhere and it was reduced to ruins in the blink of an eye. Everything turned into dust and scattered between the sky and the earth. In the far distance, a grain of light flashed away. Zhou smiled, found it, and sat on the golden Ma Kuxuan in the Taoist crown, made a sword gesture with his hand, and a sword light flew through the air like a dragon and swept across the top of the mountain. The trajectory of the sword light seemed to be winding, but in fact it coincided with a river flowing through time, which is equivalent to it goes straight down the river, so this is the straightest and shortest way. A ray of sword light was thousands of miles away, hitting the glorious figure that could not dodge. The latter used his fists to fight the sword energy, stubbornly resisting, attacking and defending, and a splash of water sprayed out on the spot. Ma Kuxuan obviously heard the guy curse, and like a bereaved dog he scurried into another place to hide, and continued to avoid his sharp edge, first delaying time, and then looking for ways to defeat the enemy. Zhou said, the other party has probably determined that I am not Zhou's real body. If Zhou really used Ma Kuxuan as a human fairy connecting heaven and earth to plot against Qin Pingon, he wouldn't have spent so much time on it, and it would have been completed on the other side of the Sword Qi Great Wall. Ma Kuxuan said angrily, I thought your last words were words that only you could say, which would make him more convinced that you are your true form. Didn't you think that it would actually make him suspicious? Zhou smiled and said, you are superfluous. I warned you at that time to give up when you see good things. You should have faked it all the way to the end, and it was completely true. It's like a delicate landscape painting, but you have to capture a freehand flower. Anyone who sees it will feel inappropriate. As he spoke, Zhou Mi had already taken a step forward. This time he directly broke through the barrier between the two illusory worlds with his body. He crossed the boundary and changed the ground. A gorgeous scene like the shattering of glass appeared around him. The heavy rain was pouring and there was an escape convoy. On the muddy road, boxes were scattered on both sides, which may have rolled down by themselves or were pushed down by the driver's servants. Many open boxes and books fell out. These were inherited in an orderly manner and had many seals. Rare books have survived fires and insect infestations, but they cannot escape the war. In this war-torn world, the only thing worth less than antiques is probably books. They are heavy and cannot be exchanged for money. If you don't throw them away, you will lose nothing. Zhou Mi, who had a golden crown on his head, squatted down and picked up a soft book stained with yellow mud. Ma Kuxuan urged him to quickly find out Qin Pingan's whereabouts. Zhou Mi asked him not to rush, quickly opened the pages of the book, stretched out his fingers and touched to press the word Qin for a moment, and then find the other words peace on another page. Then he shakes his wrist gently and a rare book that is said to be worth 1 or 2 gold per page is shaken off, leaving only 3 gold pieces. Words hanging in midair. Zhou Mi then lightly stamped his feet, using a method similar to summoning gods and commanding the land. The 3 golden words were shaky and dim, and eventually turned into ashes without any light. They fell into the mud with the rain, but Qin Pingan was still nowhere to be seen. Ma Kuxuan laughed heartily and said, "Is it because you don't have enough heat, or is this guy Qin Pingan's golden body too calm to hold his breath?" Zhou Mi smiled, then picked up a few more books on the ground, and reconstructed the name Qin Pingan from the black and white words in the books. Then he quickly found the word luo and from the page of the book, and then took the hidden word from and the official word from Huanyo respectively. To avoid making a fool of himself again, Zhou Mi simply spelled out Sword Qi Great Wall, Lizhu Cave Sky, and Mud Bottle Alley together. As a result, 2 treasure urns filled with divine light were hung in front of Zhou Mi, with the words Qin Pingan of Lolu Mountain and Hidden Official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi written respectively. In addition, each of the talismans still has a line of narration and footnotes in small characters. Mud Bottle Alley, Lizhu Cave Sky. Zhou Mi said, "It will definitely succeed." Ma Kuxuan understood it in his heart, waited for Zhou Mi's lips to move slightly and issued another order. Ma Kuxuan, who was waiting for the opportunity, took the lead and punched out, still using Chao Si's punching method and strength. The fist power was much higher than that of Chao Ci in the Qingbai fight in the Chinese Confucian temple. It was obvious that neither Chao Ci nor Qin Pingan had a tacit understanding at that time, and neither of them used their full strength. Qin Pingan, who was forcibly recruited, did not know what methods Ma Kuxuan would use and could not prescribe the right medicine, so it was difficult for him to retaliate. He could only try to defend himself. Apart from a bright red robe on his body, there were tens of thousands of people floating around. The various colored talismans are layered one after another, like dozens of long rivers of talismans, entangled into a ball, protecting the true body in the center of the circle. Unfortunately, despite many methods, Ma Kuxuan's punch still smashed the Fulu River into pieces. The light was distorted and the scene was chaotic. However, Qin Pingan just glanced at Zhou Mi, raised his arms in front of him, and then his body like a stone, it hit a piece of stretched cotton curtain, pulling the cloth toward the center of the stone and gathering it. The world, mountains, rivers, people and buildings were all accumulated in the folds of the cloth. Ma Kuxuan raised his hand and countless golden bolts of lightning struck crazily at the center of the bottom of the pit. Zhou Mi issued another divine decree to forcibly recall Qin Pingan, the landlord of Fangtiandi. A purple sword light swept out from the center of Zhou Mi's eyebrows and pierced Qin Pingan's head, so close that he could not avoid it. Qin Pingan had no choice but to turn his head slightly, and the slender sword light cut a deep wound on his face with bones visible. In this fight, Ma Kuxuan had the upper hand, and with careful cooperation Qin Pingan, the host, was unable to fight back. When the spiritual light of the imperial talisman was exhausted, Qin Pingan finally regained his freedom and escaped into the boundless void. However, Zhou Mi followed him like a shadow again. He changed the territory and revealed a Dharma form. He stepped on the earth and trampled a mountain under his feet into powder. He lowered his head and arched his back and stretched out the curtain of the sky with his back. The Dharma minister was wearing golden armor and turned into a 10,000-foot-long holding a thunder whip. He hit the ground with a whip, rolled the tip of the whip a few more times, whipped the ground several times, and in the blink of an eye, a building was destroyed. The capital city with millions of residents was reduced to dilapidated ruins and became the battlefield site of the Immortal family's battle. A subtle sword light spread along the lightning whip. Ma Kuxuan cut it off with just a flick of his finger. The sword light of a swordsman was so vulnerable. The situation is out of his control. Qin Pingon must change the battlefield again with sword escape, using different geographical locations to exchange for the passage of time and try to delay as much time as possible. Countless uncivilized creatures on the earth looked up blankly at the fire that broke through the sky, making this place look like day in the middle of the night, as if a natural disaster was coming. A huge swamp in a barbarian land was directly filled up by a star falling from the sky. The huge momentum caused the entire small world to be shattered. The cracks of the sky and the Earth's axis were heard one after another. The illusion was like a piece of porcelain that was about to be broken but not broken. Qin Pingon has already left this place and fled to a secret landscape. It's like someone leaving the side door of a house, taking a detour and walking in from the main entrance to kill him. Unexpectedly, a small bronze bell appeared on the horizon, and then a giant hand as white as jade appeared. Just a slight shake and a loud bang shook the whole sky to pieces. The owner of the giant hand, Zhou, reminded him from the bottom of his heart. It's been half a stick of incense. Ma Kuxuan grinned and said, as far as I know, this guy always fights with people through force. He doesn't know how to run away. Having the upper hand but still unable to severely injure Qin Pingon, unable to turn the advantage into a victory, it is like having a pile of banknotes in your pocket that cannot be cashed, which is not beautiful after all. Zhou smiled and said, before he had not yet mastered sword making, so there was no point in running away. He might as well fight hard. Now that he knows he is invincible, anyone else would choose to retreat. Ma Kuxuan clasped the back of his head with both hands and sat in this messy dojo. I have been running around for so long. I don't know how far he has solved the puzzle. Zhou said, stop delaying, otherwise things will change. Ma Kuxuan smiled lazily and said, you are an outsider in this game. For Ma Kuxuan, his leisurely pursuit and Qin Pingan's frustrated escape were like the hide-and-seek game often played among children. Ma Kuxuan said regretfully, I was so frightened that I didn't take the bait. Zhou said, you deliberately let him choose the Great Wall of Sword Qi, which is a good move. He will naturally think of me and the boss sword Immortal. There is no need for you to make more calculations and foreshadowing, but while he is still kept in the dark, if you didn't make him think of the word Qingqingdu in his mind, it would be a bad move. Ma Kuxuan said, it's a pity. It's my fault that I failed to invite the complete third god. Zhou smiled and said, I have said it a long time ago. After all, this person is a scholar. He insists on being alone in a dark room and not betraying his heart. Therefore, even in his mind, it is impossible to call Qingqing by his first name. Ma Kuxuan curled his lips and disagreed. Zhou said, it is better to choose Qingqingdu than to choose left and right. Ma Kuxuan said with a nonchalant look on his face, the scene needs to be big, so if you have to choose, of course I should choose the one with the best swordsmanship. Even if Qingqingdu has half of his Taoist skills and 50% off his sword skills, the power won't be too weak, right? Zhou smiled and shook his head, looking helpless. It turned out that in Ma Kuxuan's heart-centered world, there were 3 incense tables placed at the same time, but there was only one incense burner with incense and smoke curling up to worship 3 people. In addition to Wenhai Zhou and Chao Ci in white, there is also an old man with a sword, who is the boss swordsman of the Sword Qi Great Wall, Qingqingdu. But compared to the first 2, Qingqingdu's face is relatively blurry, and his figure is ethereal and uncertain. Ma Kuxuan's visualization is similar to some kind of mysterious refining and casting, which can erect a faceless statue of clay and wood sculptures on the altar. Of course, there is a limit to the height of their golden bodies, which is of course linked to Ma Kuxuan's realm. Qi practitioners stop at the ascension stage and martial artists stop at the ascension stage. Otherwise, since the daring Ma Kuxuan dared to visualize even Wenhai Zhou, why not just move out the founder of the 3 religions and enshrine him on the altar? The same canonization of landscape gods, the Confucian temple of Zhongtu, the Song dynasty of Dali, and a small country belonging to the Aquarius continent. Although the 3 canonizations are all reasonable and legal orthodoxy, Their ranks are quite different. Qin Pingan's imagination and thoughts related to someone are equivalent to opening the face of the statue and being responsible for adding gold and color to make the statue lifelike and more real. Ma Kuxuan carefully prepared 3 god statues, for Qin Pingan waiting for the latter to go. The thoroughness of Taoism, Chao Xiai of martial arts, and Qin Qingdu of swordsmanship. It just so happened that these 3 people had all appeared on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In a secret world where a civil servant was setting up a table by the river to pray for rain, and people were parading through the streets to burn the paper dragon king. Qin Pingan held a sword in one hand and stretched out his hand to wipe away the blood flowing from his ears to his temples. He has been beaten and his injuries are not serious. Fortunately, his true body, soul, and the foundation of his path have not been injured. If Zhoumi's present world is a puzzle for which Ma Kuxuan has already given clues, then the answer is indeed visualization. Assuming that what Ma Kuxuan said is true and he did not accept Zhoumi's invitation to ascend to heaven, then of course Qin Pingan is closer to the truth than Ma Kuxuan, whether it is Zhoumi's cultivation level or Chao's real boxing skills. In other words, Ma Kuxuan's seemingly cheating magical power has natural limitations. He cannot imagine it out of thin air, but Qin Pingan has to imagine it. Just like a fishing trip that is sure to make a profit, Ma Kuxuan visualized when Hai Zhoumi holding a fishing rod, and the fish he caught was a certain person's name that Qin Pingan was thinking about. As long as Qin Pingan bites the hook and thinks of someone, Ma Kuxuan will take the opportunity to lift the rod and put it into the fish basket, becoming real. And this person is Ma Kuxuan's catch. He has become Qin Pingan's current imaginary enemy. For example, Tao Xiai. Because Qin Pingan's thoughts are like a surging river, and all the people Qin Pingan knows are fish in the water. No, besides Chao Xiai there is also Zhoumi. Qin Pingan suddenly realized at this moment, when did Ma Kuxuan, a stubborn man, become so smart? That Zhoumi who first appeared at the top of the city was clearly a hint to Qin Pingan. Therefore Zhoumi was just a show at the beginning just to scare people, and his methods were probably not very clever at that time. But after Ma Kuxuan used the magical power of visualization at a certain moment, Qin Pingan was always wary of the face-to-face Zhoumi, and was actually given the true meaning by Qin Pingan. Therefore it was not until that moment that Zhoumi truly changed from a fake Zhoumi to a fake Zhoumi. A first-class authentic work. Just like a person who was dead in name only, he finally came back to life. In a sense, this is Qin Pingan asking for trouble. Because whatever you fear in your heart will come true. Ma Kuxuan quietly tricked Qin Pingan once, just like a canonization ceremony of a landscape god. Ma Kuxuan was responsible for the name and peace, and Qin Pingan, who had mastered the Tao, was responsible for the actual peace. Finally, a story emerged, an orthodox apotheosis. Lay people need to burn incense when entering the temple to worship gods. Usually 3 sticks of incense are lit. Presumably Ma Kuxuan's way of asking gods to come down to the truth is also a similar etiquette. It better be so. What if Ma Kuxuan lit 9 incense sticks or something? Qin Pingan would have to endure it for such a long time. I don't dare to stay here for a long time. I don't know what kind of tricks Na Zhoumi used. He is simply haunted. Qin Pingan didn't wait for the opponent to catch up with him. He managed to take a breath of pure energy and immediately changed the venue. Sure enough, as soon as Qin Pingan walked away, a heavy rain fell in this area with raindrops the size of soybeans. Every raindrop, they are all formed by the condensed sword energy, stabbing the mountains and rivers of the earth into a dense sieve filled with countless holes. Ma Kuxuan clicked his tongue and said in wonder, Qin Qingda's swordsmanship is only half of the Taoist skills. Is it so exaggerated? Zhoumi smiled and asked, finally regret it? Ma Kuxuan sneered and said, what regrets are there? In my life I like mute-eating Coptis chinensis most. Don't waste it. With half of Qin Qingda's sword skills you can use it for real. Zhoumi smiled slightly, held a sword in his hand, and slashed several Qin Pingan's hearts to heaven and earth with one sword. In order to block this sword light, a knight sword with immortal weapon rank was cut off on the spot. A bright red robe that was also an immortal was torn apart by the unstoppable sword energy. Standing in a vast realm of Taishu, Qin Pingan returned the 2 broken swords to the long sword behind him. Although the robe on his body was seriously damaged, it was still able to close on its own. Even if his body is almost cut open by a sword, a Qi practitioner in the immortal realm can recover as before after being cut off. However, he has to seriously damage his Taoist practice, fearing that his soul will be damaged. Zhou Mi raised his sword and let the light of the sword fall into the blue sky. A golden arch bridge was chopped into pieces on the spot. Qin Pingan's defensive swordsmanship seems to have been secretly learned from the ranger Su Ruo. The entire Taishu realm echoed with the violent sound caused by the sword energy. Qin Pingan stood on the fragmented capital of a golden arch bridge and asked, "What is the price you have to pay?" Setting up altars on the mountain and asking gods to come down require certain rules to be followed. Although Qi practitioners use various methods and choose shortcuts to minimize their own losses, the price that Qi practitioners should pay will never fail. Zhou Mi didn't even bother to remind him in his heart and directly said, "Why don't you kill him and you can reminisce about the past?" Ma Kuxuan and Qin Pingan were like two village children playing house, arranging their troops and facing each other on the mud. One said I had 100,000 soldiers and horses, and the other said I had magic soldiers and generals. You come and I go as long as you dare to think. Of course it was just a quarrel. But just like if one of the kids cheats, his dream can come true but the other one can only dream about it. Qin Pingan and Zhou Mi each had their own questions, but Ma Kuxuan answered the question incorrectly. "You actually guessed that you were in a certain situation and that I was the guest. But you only thought about it 3 times, but I didn't predict it, so it didn't work every time. If you are suppressed by the thought of doing nothing, then you simply don't even dare to think about it anymore." Zhou Mi sighed and said with a regretful expression, "Why bother giving out the answer to the riddle on your own initiative? There will be so many details that you will fail in your efforts." Ma Kuxuan, what on earth are you thinking?" Qin Pingan's face was expressionless. In an instant the 3 altars and statues in Ma Kuxuan's heart-centered world collapsed, just like the final destination of the statues in the Immortal tomb in their hometown, where dust returned to dust and dust returned to earth. Zhou Mi was slightly startled, then thought of the reason in an instant, laughed loudly, and before dissipating he sincerely praised, "Qin Pingan, good method as you said before, you want to deceive me sincerely." It turned out that Qin Pingan used another method of killing himself with a sword, killing Zhou Mi, Chao Xiai and Qin Qing all together in his own state of mind. Ma Kuxuan tiptoed and stepped on the pillars of a golden arch bridge. He squatted and asked with a smile, "You paid such a high price just to play with me until now. What are you doing?" Qin Pingan bent his knees and sat cross-legged on the broken pieces of the arch bridge and said, "Prove it with facts. I was just playing with you in the previous fights." Ma Kuxuan asked doubtfully, "Seriously?" Qin Pingan sneered, "Why should I lie to a fool?" Ma Kuxuan tilted his head and stared at his peer. This time Qin Pingan was injured so seriously and the price he paid was so high. Even the long sword was broken. "These are not fake?" Ma Kuxuan asked. "Did you really understand Zhou Mi's words from beginning to end? Can you even guess who the 3 people I asked the gods to be? Are you really able to count the last person, who is Qin Qingdu?" Qin Pingan sneered, "Are you still thinking about Qin Qingdu? Come on, give it a try. Let's see if the boss swordsman you invited delivers the sword faster, or if I kill him faster and remember it faster." Ma Kuxuan asked curiously, "Could it be that you used the trick of reversing the flow of time, right?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "I thought about trying it once or twice, but I don't have the ability for the time being. I can't drag you down. What's more, this method will consume time and is irreversible. It is no less expensive than now." Ma Kuxuan nodded and said, "This is reasonable. Otherwise it would be too unreasonable. Wouldn't it be that the Ascension realm, which is a level higher than yours, is being teased and applauded by you?" Ma Kuxuan stood up and said, "If I win, everything will be fine with you. But if I lose accidentally, you have to promise me something." Qin Pingan said, "Let's talk about it first and then we'll have to say whether we agree or not." Ma Kuxuan said, "Over at the Ma family's mansion, if you think you deserve to die, you can give them a happy life. If you deserve to live, live. And stop editing memories and manipulating people's hearts." Qin Pingan remained silent. Ma Kuxuan smiled and said, "Then I'll take it as your acquiescence." The next moment Ma Kuxuan's figure suddenly became as big as immeasurable. He directly grasped an ancient star in the palm of his hand and smashed it towards Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan tried it and he was also so powerful. With a wave of his sleeve he smashed a bright galaxy towards the Dharma form of Ma Kuxuan. In this dual realm where Qin Pingan is the bird in the flying sword cage and Ma Kuxuan's visualization is present, both sides show off their magical powers, and the power of each method is unbelievable. Countless battlefields that were originally filled with stars were turned into large blank ruins by both sides. Fortunately, they are all false appearances, otherwise the great monks of the Yin-Yang family and the Five Elements family, plus the Qi practitioner of the human Qintian supervisor, would probably go crazy. However, it is false to the outside world, but it is extremely real to both sides on the battlefield. Cannot be taken lightly. If you are not careful, it will hurt your body and Taoist mind. Time passes slowly. I don't know how long it has been. Ma Kuxuan suddenly invited a statue of Qin Qingdu. Qin Pingan almost instinctively handed out a sword with all his strength. Then he chopped the horse Kuxuan into nothingness along with the illusion. Ma Kuxuan's figure was sitting upright in Taishu. His figure turned into countless golden lights, and a little light appeared on the sky. The golden light carrying the soul could have followed the light and left this cage. Unexpectedly, the golden light stopped for a moment as if looking back at Qin Pingan, who had been their old enemy for many years. Then the golden light shook on its own, completely shattering the soul. He refused to have another afterlife and would never accept this. Qin Pingan's good intention to defeat his body caused a golden torrential rain in the caged bird. He even seemed to deliberately not look at the sight of the sun again in the Mafu ancestral hall, and everyone woke up from a big dream. It seemed like he just trusted Qin Pingan's verbal promise. The Ma couple only had half a sweet dream. First, their son Ma Kuxuan stopped Qin Pingan. They were able to successfully become a pair of landscape gods protected by Fengdu, and the family blossomed. But the second half failed. It was a veritable nightmare. When he was satisfied, he was suddenly detained and tried in the Qinghuang temple. The sentence was harsh. He was reincarnated more than 20 times and was not allowed to have a human body. He finally regained his human body and got married again, but he suffered a lot in that life. Died an untimely death. The rest of the Ma family had also woken up. After looking at each other in disbelief, they began to regard each other as enemies. A powerful family with deep roots in Yushuan Kingdom was divided over this. They either committed crimes or fought to separate the family. Qin Pingan stood outside the gate of the Ma family. It was still the Qingming festival, but the rain had stopped. Wearing a green shirt and long coat with an umbrella under his arm, he walked slowly towards another place. In Chongning County, the capital city, Taoist priest Wu Di, who worked as a fortune teller, even stayed in the house he rented later. Qin Pingan had just passed by the Yamen shrine when he heard a familiar voice and came to the top of the Sword Qi Great Wall in a daze. On top of the city stood the ceremonial saint. The current situation is both true and false. Qin Pingan put away the umbrella under his arm and bowed in salute. The Li Xing nodded in greeting and said, "The Zhoumi imagined by Ma Kuxuan is fake, so you don't have to worry about it. But I can't guarantee whether Zhoumi will pass this matter and see your current situation, realm and mentality." Qin Pingan breathed a sigh of relief. "Seeing is false, hearing is true." Li Xing said, "The injury is not serious." Qin Pingan said, "Compared with the earliest expectations, it is still a bit better. I have to refining my sword, wandering at night and mending that immortal robe. It's better to have a headache than to fall into a state of decline." Having seen the Zhoumi behind Ma Kuxuan before, he knew that he had to be cautious in this matter. If it turned out that Zhoumi had left a trail in the world, the consequences would be disastrous. You must let the Confucian Temple know about this immediately, and at the same time try to prevent the Confucian Temple sages from interfering with your revenge. It is not easy to say it is simple, but it is not that difficult to say it is difficult. If you have anything to do, go to the sage. But Qin Pingan only knew the magic power of shrinking the earth, but he didn't know how to cross continents in one step like the Fire Dragon Master. He was destined to be unable to rush to the Chinese Confucian Temple to report the matter. It was too late to send a message with the flying sword, so he had no choice but to use the most straightforward method, is to call out the true name of the ceremonial saint several times in your heart. At that time Li Xing just replied, "I understand," and said nothing more. Even so, Qin Pingan still took reassurance, walked out of Ma's ancestral hall, and just let go of his hands and feet to catch and fight with Ma Kuxuan. The Li Xing asked, "How does it feel to have endured for many years and had your great revenge repaid?" Qin Pingan looked a little tired, so he casually squatted on the top of the city and looked into the distance. In this world, except for the Sword Qi Great Wall, which was strictly in line with reality, in addition, the mountains and rivers in the wild world deviated greatly from the real situation. 100,000 mountains, Tuyue Mountain, Yilo River and other places that Qin Pingon has been to and seen with his own eyes have all been moved and clustered together, like a warehouse where objects are stored. Qin Pingon was silent for a moment and said calmly, I did something that I had to do, but I don't seem to feel much joy. He just takes it for granted. Li Xing smiled and said, if you want to drink, feel free to do so. Qin Pingon took out the sword-raising gourd and drank it. Li Xing Buting asked, if you were in my position, what would you do? You don't need to say more, just summarize it in one sentence. Qin Pingon was speechless for a moment. He had never thought about such a big question. How should I answer it? In ancient times, Li Xing once joined forces with Mr. Sanshan Jiuho to create a far-reaching change. Descendants who know something about this old almanac often think that the failure is to be lenient and the failure is to be close. In fact, on the contrary, it is because the laws and regulations re-edited by the Li Xing are too complicated and meticulous. Qin Pingon thought carefully for a moment and said tentatively, want to find the greatest common denominator for all living things in the world? Li Xing nodded and said with a smile, this is not a bad answer. He is worthy of being a national master. Qin Pingon didn't say anything. It was not bad but not good. I am no stranger to this kind of public talk. Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment, plucked the snow at his feet, grabbed a snowball and bravely said, Xing Li, don't let me go to the Confucian temple as an errand? Assuming that the Li Xing reaches the 15th realm, there will be an extremely important vacancy in the Confucian temple, and someone must take his place to handle the complicated affairs of the two highest and lowest places in the world. Of course, Qin Pingon didn't mean to fill the vacancy of the position of the ceremonial saint. No matter how brave he was, he would not dare to think so. Rather, it was similar to the relationship between the minister and the doctor in the 6 departments of the secular dynasty. The two were several grades apart, but the latter's official duties were a little bit more. Li Xing glanced at Qin Pingon, half smiling but not smiling. Qin Pingon immediately knew that he was overthinking it. Li Xing rarely joked, you really dare to think and do it, why don't you just say that you can fill my place in the Confucian temple? In this way there is no burden in chatting and Qin Pingon has nothing to be embarrassed about. He really wants to chat openly without any restrictions. Who brought up the trend of summer palace? Because Li Xing needs to sit outside and keep an eye on the path of the Qing Dao. After Zhou Xian returned to the Xinghe dojo, he briefly mentioned Qin Pingan's path to breaking through the realm with Li Xing. In his words he expressed great appreciation. Everyone calls Qin Pingon Qin Daoyu. Qin Pingon asked, in all these years has there ever been a time when Li Xing couldn't help but take action? The Li Xing smiled and said, you are no longer young. How can you behave like this if you fight and kill? Qin Pingon was not sure for a moment whether the words of Li Xing were expressed with emotion or a pun. In short, this sentence only meant the literal meaning. If Xiao Mo and Xiego were present, they would not like to hear it. I once heard Xiego talk about an embarrassing incident of her family's Xiaomo. Next to that stupid big scholar, there was a scholar who was very good at fighting. He never lost in a fight. Xiaomo was not convinced and said that he was also a ruthless scholar. People are afraid of their eggs. As a result, after the sword questioning was over, Xiao Mo told the master of Bixiao Cave in Luobaotan that the young master was not weak in ability. Qin Pingon couldn't believe Xiego. After all, she liked to exaggerate, so she went to the person involved to seek confirmation. At that time Xiao Mo was angry. Since she didn't refute, it was the truth. The Li Xing asked, in the wild battlefield the Confucian temple's arrangements are quite stable, but there is a lack of a position similar to your sword Qi Great Wall prisoner. Do you have any ideas? Don't worry, there will be rewards. Qin Pingon did not hesitate and said categorically, no. Li Xing nodded and did not embarrass Qin Pingon, then find someone else. Qin Pingon knew that this was the style of Li Xing, who acted vigorously and resolutely and said exactly what he said. There is no need to go around with a junior like me. When it comes to the position of criminal officer, anyone who takes it will be on pins and needles. Those with low realm cannot convince the public. For those whose realms are high enough, such as Longhu Mountain Celestial Master Zhang Tianlai, Hulong Zhenren and others who are highly respected, it is not a matter of dissatisfaction with others, but a matter of embarrassment for them. When you become a criminal, you must defend others. It is not difficult to torture the demon clan, but it will be thankless if you talk about rewards and punishments within Houran Tianxia. Li Xing smiled and said, No need to feel burdened if you refuse this matter. Qin Pingon nodded and continued drinking. The only one I am most familiar with in the wild world is the Great Wall of Sword Qi. The most well-known person in the wild world is Qin Pingon, but there is no one else. Jing Juzhong of Beidasheng was actually the best candidate, and indeed the first choice for the Confucian temple. Jing Juzhong was already good at everything, let alone now possessing 314 realms in one person. It's a pity that Jing Juzhong declined. Not only that, Jing Juzhong even asked himself to withdraw from the wild world on the grounds that he wanted to retreat in Baidi City. Li Xing actually knew very well that Jing Juzhong wanted to make further progress and was ready to formally establish a religion and proclaim himself his ancestor. Li Xing suddenly asked, "Have you ever been to the Sherwan mountain of fellow Taoist monk Zhisher?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "I've only seen it from a distance but I've never had the chance to go." Li Xing said, "You can go to the Sherwanda mountain in the south and the Mirage ruins in the north if you want to go today. In half an hour you will return to the city on time. Remember not to delay, otherwise you will have to run back to the Aquarius by yourself. Continent." Qin Pingon stood up and was about to speak when the Li Xing disappeared. On the top of the tallest mountain in the center of Shawandishan, Qin Pingon had just fallen to the ground when he saw a rickety old man with his hands behind his back. He was as skinny as wood, with sunken cheeks, and was skinny and skinny. But it is such a seemingly old person who has been rooted here for thousands of years with the dojo. The great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain has no choice but to never take the half-step to reach the 15th realm. I remember Bai Jing commented on this matter. If she had been the co-owner of the wilderness, she would have used the entire Tuyue Mountain to smash this 100,000 mountain. Qin Pingon cupped his fists and said, "Junior Qin Pingon has met the seniors in the temple." The old blind man said, "Ning Yatu just left not long ago. It's a pity that your level is low and you are an immortal. Even if you set out now, you won't be able to catch up with her. Ning Yatu is almost at Fuyao continent." Qin Pingon said straight to the point, "I have something I want to ask my senior." The old blind man said, "You want to ask me why I watched Ning Yatu get injured in Liju Cave?" Qin Pingon said, "It's not a question, it's just a question." The old blind man rubbed his chin. "According to my temper, I will definitely take action. A great wall of sword qi. Over the course of thousands of years, there are only a handful of sword cultivators that I like. From the earliest dragon lord to the one with everything. Very good, but Zhong Yuan, whose luck is a bit worse, Dong Senjen, who was bitten by a dog when passing by, and Ning Yao, there are just a few of them, they are all counted, but they are not more than one hand. But Qin Qing seems to have taken the wrong medicine, but at that time he stopped me and said there was no need to take action. Do you think it's strange?" Qin Pingon asked. "What secret did the last priest reveal to the boss sword Immortal before he left?" The old blind man said perfunctorily, "Qin Qing is dead, but the Yen kingdom is not dead. When did you become more mature and courageous? Finally, you don't have to be that humiliating tortoise who dares to wander around in the Qingming world. Lord Yingguan, please go and ask Yengui yourself." Qin Pingon knew that he couldn't ask any more secrets, so he said goodbye with his hands clasped and planned to visit the former site of the Mirage. As a result, I hit a wall and had to turn back. The old blind man smiled and said, "Come when you want, leave when you want. Does Mr. Yingguan think this is a cesspool?" There was no expression on Qin Pingan's face, and there was not a single word in his voice. His Taoist heart remained unchanged. The old blind man with empty eyes raised his head and looked at the swordsman in front of him. The swordsman, who was less than 50 years old, was considered outstanding in the history of the Sword Qi Great Wall. He clicked his tongue and said, "How many Qin will we kill? How can Pingan become such a Qin Pingan? Have you done any rough calculations or statistics?" Qin Pingon said, "There are too many to count." The old blind man laughed. "I've always had a bad mouth. When I talk to people, I like to spit out of my mouth as if I've just eaten hot shit. Don't mind me." Qin Pingon was caught off guard. "You definitely won't be able to win if you fight, and you are afraid of encountering someone like this when you quarrel." The old blind man stretched out his nails, gently grabbed a bit of flesh and said with emotion, "I really encountered someone who was not an eyesore. Even if I asked you to come in, I slapped you back. When I met someone who was not an eyesore, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense. So don't think that if you killed Ma Kushuan of Xinghua Lane, the half-owner of my eyeball, I would be disgusted with you. Far from it, I would choose him back then. It's because Ma Kuxuan's child has the least human touch." Qin Pingon did not comment on this and just asked, Xiago also left? The old blind man raised his chin and said, Bai Jing found a place on the top of a mountain to open a cave. She said she was going to be in seclusion for a few days, but in fact she was just hiding there for fun. Here I have to urge her to break through. Qin Pingon asked, Is there any sign of her breaking through? The old blind man said, No, she really wants to find a certain path and has a chance to break through. If I push her every now and then it will be no fun. Qin Pingon was speechless. Are you kidding? A perfect sword cultivator in the Ascension realm? Sure enough, the 14th realm is amazing. The old blind man laughed and said, No matter how poor your Taoist qualifications are, as long as you can live for 10,000 years, is it still considered a skill? Qin Pingon said, The coveted ability to reach heaven. The old blind man asked, Do you know that blacksmith Wan of Fengxue Temple, before going to Lizhu Cave, he had a proud disciple, but the two parties could not get back together well, and the relationship between master and disciple was severed? Qin Pingon nodded and said, I checked the files of the Ministry of Punishment in the Great Li capital before. His name is Lu Jingzhuang. He likes divination and admires Lu Qi. It is said that he had inner demons and voluntarily left Fengxue Temple because of his mediocre aptitude for cultivating. Then according to the secret, the Fengxue Temple genealogy recorded in the records shows that Lu Jingzhuang was actually from the Lu family of the old Xianxia kingdom. His identity is actually similar to that of the water god Yanghua, who is now the Changchun Marquis of Dadu. The old blind man sneered, Then do you know that in your Aquarius continent, the Longwei River that spreads out from the Lizhu Cave? The Qin family, as the eldest grandson of the contemporary family head Qin Songfeng, one of his private tutors, what is your name? Qin Pingon said, According to the archives, Fuzi Liuzuan has a clean life, ancestral background, place of birth, resume and official career. They are all well documented. The Qin family of Longwei, she screened it once, and the Dali Punishment Department ran it again. I didn't think much about it. Back then Qin Pingon was deeply impressed by Qin Songfeng, a frail scholar who was gentle and polite. Among foreigners, Qin Songfeng, as a son of a wealthy family, was evaluated by Qin Pingon in his heart as a good person who must have read many books. Back then Qin Songfeng followed him, Ning Yao and Lu Baqiao into the mountains to look for the regular tree. Because Qin Songfeng had never practiced martial arts or Taoism, and his legs were too weak, he became a drag. Was quite upset, but Qin Songfeng had no complaints. What was rare was that he didn't even have any resentment in his heart. At that time Qin Pingon, although he still hadn't seen much of the world's frogs in the well, he still had a good eye for seeing people by relying on intuition and observing the details of a person's words and deeds. The old blind man said calmly, You are just a teacher hired by a wealthy family, but you can tell a young man who clearly has no qualifications to practice Taoism that sitting on the Taoist ancestor's lotus is nothing, and going to a blessed place to be a banished immortal who has given up his past? Qin Pingon raised his head and glanced at the sky. Seeing that Qin Pingon had understood, the old blind man said to himself, I wonder what the world will be like in 1,000 years. Qin Pingon said, Maybe people's hearts are still the same. The old blind man asked a question for no reason. I have never thought about it. In addition to the demons who were forcibly suppressed by Daozu, and your senior brother Cui Chan voluntarily discarded the unused porcelain figures, are there any other possibilities just like the same thing thousands of years ago? The world has been turned upside down and the master has changed again? Qin Pingon hesitated for a moment and said in his heart, Unexpected, but I hope it won't happen one day. If it does happen, I just hope that we can leave a way out. The old blind man patted the young swordsman on the shoulder and said, Qin Qingdu is not good at looks, but he has good eyesight. Qin Pingon smiled bitterly and was speechless. The old blind man remembered something and pointed to the north. Gong Tang and his apprentice happened to pass by here, and now they are on the other side of the mirage. Not long ago, Ning Yatu persuaded this old deaf child to go to your Luapa mountain as an offering. Gong Tang became very excited when he heard the proposal, and Pidian agreed, making up his mind to make a living with you in the future. Qin Pingon always felt that something was wrong. With the old deaf child's behavior of hiding away when something happened, it was unlikely that he wanted to go to Aquarius Island. Since he met Ning Yao by chance, he wanted to follow her to the colorful world. It is more reasonable. To say the least, if the old deaf child really wants to seek refuge with him, he is probably more likely to go to Tongyi's Hao Qingping sort sect. The old blind man sighed for no reason. Happiness gradually leads to sadness. Qin Pingon thought carefully and said slowly, vice versa. The old blind man chuckled and said, some people say that the last hidden official of the Sword Qi Great Wall is young and promising, responsible and strategic, and has both civil and military skills. His future is limitless. Qin Pingon knew something was wrong and refused to answer the call. The old blind man continued. He is a person who can enter the martial arts temple to worship with him while he is still alive. When Qin Pingon heard this, his head was as big as a dustpan. The old blind man said, what if he enters the Chinese Confucian temple and eats pig head meat at the same time? Doesn't it mean that one person enters both the civil and military temples at the same time? Qin Pingon, who was already haggard now, almost felt uneasy after hearing this. He had to take a deep breath to stabilize his emotions. Shanzhu Qin, who was used to a certain custom in Luopa Mountain, couldn't bear this kind of flattery, not to mention the flattery with ulterior motives. There has never been such a figure in the history of all the great dynasties in the world. Occasionally, in some small countries in history, there are people who can join the civil and military temples, but even so they are still only a handful. Enter the Qin Earth Divine Continent Confucian Temple and the Military Ancestral Martial Temple at the same time? No matter who it is, don't even think about it. Qin Pingon asked in a deep voice. Senior, may I ask which said those stupid things? I'm gonna rip his head off. The old blind man smiled and said, just forget about your polite words. Why bother asking questions? Qin Pingon said with a smile. I must go and meet him for a while to express my gratitude in person. The old blind man was silent for a moment and gave the answer, me. Qin Pingon was silent for a long time. Thank you for your love, senior. I don't know if it was the Daoist name or the old blind man whose name was Zhizi said, it's a pity. Qin Pingon knew what the senior was talking about, but he couldn't say anything. Years ago there were two children of the same age. One of them has the best fate, but he doesn't think so. One of them is the hardest hit and he doesn't even know who he is. Their family backgrounds are different, but their moods are similar, so they all live lonely lives. During their childhood they never played or roughed up with their peers. The stars are also shining brightly, and there are people holding their cheeks and looking at the sky, sitting on the small earthen bag in the immortal tomb. Someone was lying on the ridge in the field, holding a piece of grass in his mouth and crossing his legs. The water in the ditch was gurgling. They looked at the same starry sky together.